The weakest link just broke her chains. Watch until the end to see how a discarded servant becomes the storm no one saw coming. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and smash that like button. Let's build this pack together. The slap echoed across the stone courtyard like a gunshot. Lena's head snapped to the side, pain blooming hot across her cheek. She tasted copper. Her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. The world tilted, blurred. When her vision cleared, she was staring at the dirt between the cobblestones, her knees scraped raw from where she'd fallen. Above her, Kyle Draven stood with his hand still raised. "Stay down," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. Like she was nothing, less than nothing. Lena didn't move. Couldn't. Her lungs burned, but she couldn't seem to pull in enough air. Around them, the other wolves had gone silent. Servants, guards, even a few of the lower-ranking pack members who'd been passing through. All of them watching. All of them waiting to see what she'd do. She wanted to scream, wanted to claw at him, to demand answers, to ask why. But the words stuck in her throat like shards of glass. Because she already knew why. 3 days ago, under the full moon, the bond had snapped into place. She'd felt it like a rope pulling tight around her ribs, dragging her toward him even as she tried to resist. The mating bond. Faded. Unbreakable. Or so she'd thought. Kyle Draven, heir to the Draven pack, son of the Alpha, who ruled the northern frontier with an iron fist, was supposed to be untouchable. Feared, respected. And Lena? She was a servant. Orphaned at 12, taken in by the pack out of obligation rather than kindness. She scrubbed floors, hauled water, kept her head down and her mouth shut. The bond didn't care about any of that. It had hit her in the middle of the night, waking her from a dreamless sleep with a jolt so violent she thought she was dying. Her wolf had clawed to the surface, howling, demanding, and for the first time in years Lena had felt alive. Whole. Like some missing piece of herself had finally clicked into place. She'd gone to him. Stupid. Reckless. She should have known better. But she'd gone anyway, slipping through the shadows of the manor until she found him in the training yard, alone under the stars. And when she'd spoken his name, when she'd told him what she felt, what the bond was screaming at her to do, he'd looked at her like she was a stranger. No. Worse. Like she was an insect he'd found crawling on his boot. "You're mistaken," he'd said, his voice cold enough to freeze marrow. "There's no bond." She'd tried to argue, tried to make him see, but he'd grabbed her by the arm, hard enough to bruise, and dragged her out into the courtyard. In front of everyone. And then he'd rejected her. Not quietly, not privately. He'd made a show of it, his words cutting deeper than any blade. "I, Kyle Draven, heir to the Northern Pack, reject you as my mate." The bond had shattered. It felt like someone had reached into her chest and ripped out her heart. She'd collapsed, gasping, clawing at the dirt as the pain tore through her, and Kyle had just stood there, watching, his face carved from stone. Now, 3 days later, she was still bleeding. Not physically, though the bruises on her arm had turned a deep, ugly purple, but inside, where no one could see, something vital had been torn away. The bond was gone, but the ghost of it lingered, a phantom ache that wouldn't fade. And Kyle? He acted like it had never happened. "Get up." Lena flinched. The voice belonged to Maris, the head housekeeper, a sharp-faced woman with eyes like a hawk and a tongue like a whip. She grabbed Lena by the collar and hauled her to her feet, ignoring the way Lena stumbled. "You're late," Maris hissed. "The kitchens are a disaster, and if Lady Draven finds out you've been slacking off, it won't be my head on the block." Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her throat was too tight, her chest too raw. She followed Maris back toward the manor, her head down, her hands trembling. Behind her, she could feel Kyle's eyes on her back. She didn't look. The whispers had started the moment she entered the servants' corridor. They always did now. Lena kept her gaze fixed on the worn stone floor, counting her steps, trying to block out the voices. Heard she actually thought, desperate really, throwing herself, "Alpha's son, can you imagine the audacity?" A foot shot out from one of the doorways. Lena stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Laughter erupted behind her. "Careful, Lena," someone called out. "Wouldn't want you falling for anyone else." More laughter, cruel, sharp. Lena's nails dug into her palms, but she kept walking. She'd learned that responding only made it worse. The first day after the rejection, she'd tried to defend herself, tried to explain, but nobody wanted to hear it. To them, she was just a delusional servant who'd gotten ideas above her station. The truth didn't matter. The Draven estate sprawled across the northern frontier like a scar. It was a fortress more than a home. High stone walls, narrow windows, courtyards designed for defense rather than beauty. Beyond the walls, the forest pressed in close, dark and wild, and full of things that didn't belong to any pack. Lena had lived here for 8 years and she still didn't feel safe. The manor itself was a maze of corridors and chambers, built and rebuilt over generations. The newer sections were almost comfortable. Wide hallways, proper fireplaces, windows that actually kept out the cold. But the older parts, where the servants lived and worked, were cramped and drafty. Stone floors that never warmed, walls that wept moisture in the winter, ceilings so low you could touch them without stretching. Lena had a room in the oldest wing. Calling it a room was generous. It was barely large enough for a narrow bed and a wooden crate that served as both chair and table. But it was hers, and that was something. Or it had been, until 3 days ago. Now even that small sanctuary felt tainted. She couldn't lie in that bed without remembering the moment the bond had snapped into place. Couldn't close her eyes without feeling that pull, that overwhelming certainty that had turned out to be so catastrophically wrong. The kitchens were chaos when she arrived. Pots boiling over, smoke billowing from the hearth, 2 servants shouting at each other over a burnt loaf of bread. Maris shoved Lena toward the sink and barked an order, something about dishes, but Lena barely heard her. Her hands moved on autopilot, scrubbing, rinsing, stacking. Her mind was somewhere else. 3 days. 3 days since the rejection, and she still couldn't make sense of it. Fated mates didn't just happen. The bond was sacred, rare, chosen by something older and deeper than any of them understood. When it snapped into place, you didn't question it. You didn't reject it. But Kael had. The water in the sink had gone cold. Lena stared down at her reddened hands, at the grease floating on the surface. Her reflection rippled and distorted, barely recognizable. Who was she kidding? Of course he'd rejected her. Look at her. Scrawny, plain, worthless. The daughter of nobodies, left behind when her parents had been killed in a border skirmish. The pack had taken her in because it was the law. You didn't abandon your own, even orphan children with no value and no prospects. But that didn't mean they had to like it. She'd spent 8 years trying to earn her place, working harder than anyone else, never complaining, never asking for anything. And what had it gotten her? A shattered bond and a manor full of people who looked at her like she was dirt. Move! Lena jumped. One of the other servants, a girl named Petra, younger than Lena but twice as vicious, shoved past her, slamming a stack of plates onto the counter. Water sloshed over the edge of the sink, soaking Lena's sleeves. Watch it, Petra sneered. Oh wait, you can't, can you? Too busy mooning over the air. Lena's hands stilled. I'm not... Everyone saw, Petra interrupted. She picked up a rag and started wiping down the counter with exaggerated care, but her eyes never left Lena's face. You really thought the Alpha's son would want you? A nobody servant with no family, no rank, nothing? Petra. Maris's voice cracked like a whip from across the kitchen. Enough. Petra fell silent, but the damage was done. Around the kitchen, the other servants had stopped working, their eyes fixed on Lena. Some looked curious. Others looked disgusted. A few looked almost pitying. That was worse than the contempt. Lena turned back to the sink, her face burning. Her hands shook as she plunged them back into the cold water. The rest of you, get back to work, Maris snapped. Those roasts won't cook themselves. And if dinner is late, I'm assigning double shifts to everyone. The kitchen slowly returned to its usual chaos, but Lena could still feel their stares, could still hear the whispers underneath the clatter of pots and pans. She focused on the dishes, on the simple, mindless task of scrubbing away filth. It was easier than thinking, but the thoughts came anyway. Had she really been that stupid? That naive? The bond had felt so real, so certain. When it snapped into place, it wasn't like a maybe or a hope. It was like suddenly knowing which way was north. Undeniable. Absolute. She'd felt it, and she'd been so sure Kael would feel it too. But when she'd found him in the training yard that night, when she'd stammered out what she was experiencing, he'd looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. There's no bond, he'd said flatly. You're confused, delusional. Go back to your quarters. She should have listened, should have taken the dismissal and slunk away. But the Bond had been screaming at her, and she'd been convinced that he was just in shock, that he needed time to process it. So she'd pushed, insisted, and he'd grabbed her arm and dragged her out into the courtyard. In front of everyone, Lena's hands clenched around the plate she was washing. It slipped from her grip and shattered in the sink. Careful, Maris barked. That's coming out of your rations. Lena nodded mutely and started picking up the pieces. A shard sliced her thumb, drawing blood, but she barely felt it. All she could feel was the memory of that moment. Kael's voice, loud and clear, echoing across the courtyard. I, Kael Draven, heir to the Northern Pack, reject you as my mate. The words had hit her like a physical blow. The bond, that bright burning thing inside her chest, had shattered. Literally shattered. She'd felt it break apart, felt the pieces tear through her like broken glass. She'd collapsed, actually collapsed, right there in the dirt, gasping for air that wouldn't come. And Kael had just stood there, watching, his face completely blank. She didn't remember much after that. Someone, maybe Maris, had hauled her to her feet and dragged her away. She'd spent the next 2 days in her room, too broken to move, too empty to cry. The phantom ache was still there, like a missing limb, a hollow space where something vital used to be. Lena finished the dishes in silence. Her thumb had stopped bleeding, but the cut throbbed with every movement. She wrapped it in a strip of cloth torn from her apron and kept working. The rest of the day blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and humiliation. By the time the sun set, Lena's back ached, her feet hurt, and her head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. She stumbled out of the kitchens and headed for the servants' quarters, keeping her head down. The corridors were crowded now, pack members returning from patrols, servants rushing to finish their tasks before nightfall. Lena pressed herself against the wall to let a group of guards pass. They didn't even glance at her. To them, she was invisible. A piece of furniture, something to be stepped around and forgotten. It had always been that way, but now it felt different, sharper. Like the rejection had stripped away whatever thin protection her servitude had offered. She was nothing, less than nothing. No. The thought came unbidden, fierce and sudden. I'm not nothing. But even as she thought it, doubt crept in. What was she really? What did she have to offer? No family, no rank, no power, just a broken bond and a manor full of people who hated her. Lena climbed the narrow stairs to the servants' wing, her thoughts churning. She needed to sleep, needed to stop thinking, stop feeling, just for a few hours. But as she turned the corner toward her room, a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Lena yelped, spinning around, and found herself face to face with Ronan, one of Kael's personal guards. Quiet, Ronan muttered. He was older than her, maybe mid-30s, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His grip on her wrist was firm, but not painful. He glanced over his shoulder, then pulled her into an alcove out of sight. What? Shut up and listen. Ronan's voice was low, urgent. You need to stay away from the East Wing. Lena blinked. What? The East Wing, Ronan repeated. His eyes were hard, serious. Don't go near it. Don't ask questions. Don't even think about it. Understand? I don't. Do you understand? His grip tightened slightly, just enough to make his point. Lena nodded slowly, even though she had no idea what he was talking about. Ronan held her gaze for another moment, then released her wrist and stepped back. Good. Now get out of here before someone sees us. He disappeared down the corridor, moving fast and silent. Lena stood there, her heart pounding. The East Wing. She'd never been there. It was off limits to servants, had been for as long as she could remember. She'd always assumed it was storage, or maybe private quarters for the family. But the way Ronan had said it, the urgency in his voice, something was wrong. Lena shook her head and started walking again. She had enough problems without adding mysterious warnings to the list. But as she climbed the final flight of stairs to her room, she couldn't stop wondering, what's in the East Wing? Her room was exactly as she'd left it. Narrow bed, thin blanket, wooden crate, a single candle on the windowsill, burned down to a stub. Lena closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Silence. Finally, she peeled off her apron and tossed it onto the crate, then sank down onto the bed. Every muscle in her body ached. She should eat something. She'd barely touched her rations at midday, but the thought of food made her stomach turn. Instead, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. The room was cold. It was always cold. Even in summer, the stone walls seemed to leach the warmth from the air. Lena pulled the blanket over herself and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions, the same doubts. Why did he reject me? She'd replayed that night 1,000 times, searching for clues. Had she said something wrong? Done something to offend him? But no, he'd rejected her before she'd even finished speaking. Like he'd already made up his mind. Like she didn't matter. Maybe she didn't. Maybe the bond had been wrong. A mistake, some cosmic error that had bound her to someone who would never want her. But that didn't make sense. The bond didn't make mistakes. It was ancient, primal, older than the pacts themselves. It didn't just happen to the wrong people. So why? Why? The question echoed in her mind, unanswered, unanswerable. Lena rolled onto her side and pulled the blanket tighter. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters. The forest was restless tonight. She could feel it, even from here, a wrongness in the air, a tension that made her wolf stir uneasily beneath her skin. Something was coming. Lena closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The nightmares started almost immediately. She was running through the forest, branches tearing at her skin, her lungs burning. Something was chasing her, something massive, with eyes like embers and teeth like knives. She could hear it behind her, crashing through the undergrowth, getting closer. And then she heard Kael's voice, distant and distorted, calling her name. Lena. She tried to run faster, but her legs wouldn't move. The forest closed in around her, the trees twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Lena, closer now, right behind her. She spun around and woke up gasping. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room was too dark, too small, the walls pressing in like a tomb. Then the memories came flooding back. Kael, the rejection, the bond snapping apart like a severed rope. Lena pressed her hands to her face and tried to breathe. It had been a dream. Just a dream. But it had felt so real. She sat up slowly, her heart still racing. The candle on the windowsill had burned out, leaving the room in total darkness. Outside, the wind had died down, but the silence that replaced it was somehow worse. Too quiet. Lena swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up. Her hands were shaking. She needed air, needed to move. She dressed quietly, pulling on her worn boots and a patched cloak, and slipped out of her room. The corridor was dark and empty, lit only by the occasional torch burning low in its bracket. Most of the pack was asleep by now. Only the guards on the night shift were awake, patrolling the walls and the grounds. Lena moved through the shadows like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the stone floor. She didn't have a destination in mind. She just needed to walk, to do something other than lie in bed and relive the worst moment of her life over and over again. The manor was a different place at night, quieter, darker, almost peaceful, if you ignored the drafts and the creaking floorboards and the sense that something was always watching from the corners. Lena wandered through the corridors, her mind blank, her body moving on instinct. And then she realized where her feet had taken her. The east wing. She stopped, her pulse quickening. The corridor ahead was darker than the rest of the manor, the torches unlit. At the far end, a heavy wooden door stood closed, its surface scarred and weathered. Don't go near it. Ronan's warning rang in her ears. Lena hesitated. She should turn back, go to bed, forget about it. But curiosity was a wicked thing, and it had sunk its claws into her. What are you hiding? She took a step forward, then another. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness pressing in around her. Her breath came faster, her heart pounding in her chest. This was stupid, reckless. If someone caught her here, there'd be hell to pay. But she didn't stop. When she finally reached the door, she stopped and pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. No. Wait. There was something. A faint sound, muffled and distant. Like breathing? Lena's hand moved to the latch. Don't. She ignored the voice in her head and pushed. The door swung open with a low creak, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the depths of the manor. The air that wafted up was cold and damp, tinged with something metallic. Blood. Lena's stomach turned, but she didn't stop. She descended the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the rough stone wall for balance. The stairs went down farther than she expected. Down, down, down into the earth, until the temperature dropped and the air grew thick and stale. At the bottom, another door. This one was iron, reinforced with heavy bolts, and from behind it, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. A groan, low and ragged. Human. Lena's hand shook as she reached for the bolts. They were stiff, rusted, but she forced them open one by one. The metal screeched in protest, echoing in the confined space. The door groaned as she pulled it wide, and then she saw him. Cale Draven, heir to the Northern Pack, was chained to the wall like an animal. His wrists were bound in iron cuffs, his arms stretched above his head at an angle that had to be agony. His shirt was gone, his torso a patchwork of bruises and cuts. Some were fresh, still bleeding. Others had scabbed over, dark and ugly. Blood dripped from a gash on his temple, trailing down the side of his face and into his hair. His head hung forward, his chin resting on his chest. For a terrible moment, Lena thought he was dead. Then he lifted his head slowly, his eyes, once sharp and cold, now dull and glassy. When he saw her, he flinched. "Lena," he rasped. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Run." She didn't. She couldn't. She stood frozen in the doorway, her mind trying and failing to process what she was seeing. Kyle. Kyle. The Alpha's heir. The most powerful wolf in the pack after his father. Chained, beaten, tortured. "What?" Her voice came out as a croak. She swallowed and tried again. "What happened? Who did this?" Cale's laugh was bitter, broken. It dissolved into a cough that shook his entire frame. When he spoke again, his voice was even weaker. "Who do you think?" And then she understood. The rejection, the coldness, the way he'd looked at her like she was nothing, like the bond didn't exist. It wasn't because he didn't want her. It was because he was trying to protect her. From this, from him. "Your brother," Lena whispered. Kyle closed his eyes. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Damon always wanted the title," he said quietly. "He just didn't want to wait." Lena's knees buckled. She grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. Damon, Cale's older brother, the one who should have been heir, except he'd been born without the alpha gift. A wolf, yes, but not strong enough, not dominant enough. The title had passed to Kyle instead, and Damon had never forgiven him for it. "How long?" Lena asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Distant. "Does it matter?" "How long, Kyle?" He opened his eyes and looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since the rejection. 3 months, he said. 3 months. 3 months of this. Of torture and imprisonment and silence. And nobody knew. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. "Run, Lena," Cale said again. His voice was urgent now, desperate. "If Damon finds you here, if he knows you've seen this, I'm not leaving you like this. You have to. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understand that you're dying down here." The words burst out of her, loud and sharp in the confined space. "I understand that you rejected me to keep me safe, and now you're telling me to leave you here to rot? It's not your problem. The hell it isn't." Lena stepped into the cell, her hands clenched into fists. She was shaking, with fear, with anger, with something she couldn't name. "You're my mate," she said. "Rejected or not, the bond was real, and I'm not leaving you here." Cale stared at her. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. Then it died. "You can't help me," he said quietly. "No one can. Damon has the guards, the council. Even my father doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm on an extended patrol. Then we'll tell him, and say what? That his eldest son is a traitor? He'll never believe it, not without proof. Then we'll get proof." "Lena, stop!" She moved closer, close enough to see the faint tremor in his hands, close enough to smell the blood and sweat and fear. "Stop telling me what I can't do. Just let me help you." Kyle closed his eyes. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. The keys are in Damon's chambers, third drawer of his desk. But if he catches you, he won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. Lena reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle on the bruised skin. Cale flinched but didn't pull away. I'm going to get you out of here, she said. And then we're going to make him pay for what he's done. Kyle opened his eyes. They were wet. Why? He whispered. After what I did to you, after I rejected you in front of everyone, why would you help me? Lena smiled. It was a sad, broken thing, but it was real. Because you're still my mate, she said, and because somebody needs to. She turned and walked toward the door. Lena. She stopped but didn't turn around. Be careful. I will. And Lena? Yeah? I'm sorry for everything. Lena's throat tightened. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and left the cell. Behind her, in the darkness, Cale Draven closed his eyes and let himself hope. Lena's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed them flat against the cold stone wall outside Damon's chambers, forcing herself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like her mother had taught her, back when her mother was still alive. The corridor was empty, silent. Everyone was asleep or pretending to be. This was insane, completely insane. She was about to break into the chambers of the Alpha's eldest son, the wolf who'd been torturing his own brother for 3 months, and steal the keys to Kyle's chains. If Damon caught her, he wouldn't just kill her. He'd make it slow, make it hurt, and nobody would stop him. Lena closed her eyes and saw Kyle's face again, the blood on his temple, the way his arms had trembled from being held above his head for who knew how long, the empty, broken look in his eyes when he'd told her to run. Her hand steadied. She pushed away from the wall and moved to the door. It was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. Locked, probably. But she had to try. Her fingers closed around the handle. She turned it slowly, barely breathing. The latch clicked. The door swung open. He didn't lock it. Of course he didn't. Why would he? Nobody would dare enter Damon's chambers uninvited. Nobody was that stupid, except her. Lena slipped inside and closed the door behind her with a soft click. The room was larger than she'd expected, easily 3 times the size of her entire quarters. A massive bed dominated one wall, draped in furs. A fireplace crackled on the opposite side, casting dancing shadows across the floor. And there, in the corner near the window, sat a heavy wooden desk. Third drawer. That's what KL had said. Lena moved across the room on silent feet, her heart hammering so hard she was sure it would wake the entire manor. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like thunder. She reached the desk and knelt down, her fingers finding the third drawer. It was locked. Of course it was. Lena bit back a curse and looked around. There had to be something she could use, a letter opener, a hairpin, anything. Her eyes landed on a small box on top of the desk. Silver. Ornate. Expensive. She opened it. Inside, nestled on red velvet, was a key. Too easy. But she didn't have time to question it. She grabbed the key, fitted it into the drawer lock, and turned. The drawer slid open. Inside was a leather pouch, a stack of letters bound with twine, and there, a ring of iron keys. Lena snatched them up, her fingers trembling. They were heavier than she'd expected, the metal cold against her palm. She was about to close the drawer when she noticed the letters. They were addressed to someone named Marcus. The handwriting was elegant, controlled. She pulled one free and unfolded it. The heir continues to resist, but his will is breaking. Another week, perhaps 2, and he will renounce his claim. The council will have no choice but to recognize me. Everything is proceeding as planned. Lena's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just about hurting Kyle. Damon was trying to force him to give up the Alpha title, and judging by the date on the letter, he'd been planning this for months. She folded the letter and shoved it into her pocket. Proof. Kyle had said they needed proof. Now they had it. Lena closed the drawer, returned the small key to the box, and turned toward the door. And froze. Someone was standing in the doorway. Not Damon. Ronan. The guard who'd warned her away from the east wing. They stared at each other for a long, terrible moment. Then Ronan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. Lena's hand tightened around the keys. I could ask you the same thing. I'm on night patrol. You're breaking into the Alpha's son's chambers. Damon's not the Alpha's son, Lena shot back. Kyle is. Ronan's expression flickered, something that might have been guilt or fear. You went to the East Wing, he said quietly. I told you. I know what you told me. I also know what I found there. Ronan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the door, then back at her. You can't help him. Watch me. Lena. He's been down there for 3 months, she interrupted. 3 months, Ronan, and you knew. You all knew. We had no choice. There's always a choice. Ronan flinched like she'd slapped him. For a moment he looked old, tired, beaten. Damon has the loyalty of half the guard, he said quietly. The other half are too scared to act. If we move against him without proof, without the Alpha's support, it'll tear the pack apart. Civil war. So you just let him torture his own brother? I told you to stay away. That's not the same as helping him. They glared at each other, both breathing hard. Then Ronan's shoulders sagged. He ran a hand over his face and let out a long, shaky breath. What's your plan? He asked. Lena blinked. What? Your plan. You have the keys. You're going to free him. Then what? Damon will know it was you. He'll hunt you both down. Then we run. To where? The forest? You'll be dead in a week. Better than leaving him in that cell. Ronan studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said, or the stupidest. Probably both. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Give me the keys. Lena stepped back. What? No. I'm not taking them from you, Ronan said. I'm coming with you, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right. You get KL out. I'll create a distraction. Buy you time to get to the forest. Why would you help us? Ronan's expression hardened. Because I've been standing by for 3 months watching a good man get destroyed, and I'm sick of it, because Damon's going to ruin this pack if someone doesn't stop him, and because... He paused. Because I owe Kyle. He saved my life once. This is me paying that debt. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need help, but she did. She absolutely did. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Ronan nodded. We move fast, we move quiet. And if anything goes wrong, you run. Understand? Understood. Good, let's go. They moved through the manor like ghosts, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the main corridors. Ronan led the way, his hand on his sword, his eyes scanning every corner. Lena followed close behind, the keys clutched tight in her fist. The East Wing was just as dark as before, just as silent, too silent. Something felt wrong. Ronan must have felt it too, because he slowed, his hand moving to the hilt of his blade. Wait, he whispered. Lena stopped. Ahead, at the end of the corridor, the door to the staircase stood open. It hadn't been open before. She was sure of it. Ronan drew his sword. The blade whispered against the scabbard, barely audible. Stay behind me, he murmured. They approached the door slowly. Every instinct in Lena's body screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to keep moving. Ronan reached the doorway and peered down the stairs. Then he swore under his breath. What? Lena whispered. What is it? He didn't answer, just started down the stairs, moving fast now, all pretense of stealth abandoned. Lena hurried after him. The iron door at the bottom was open too, and from inside the cell came the sound of voices. Thought you could keep secrets from me? That was Damon. Lena recognized his voice from the few times she'd heard him address the pack. Smooth, cultured, with an edge like broken glass. Go to hell. Kale's voice rough and defiant, the sound of a fist hitting flesh, a grunt of pain. Ronan burst through the doorway, sword raised, and stopped. Damon stood in the center of the cell, his hand still clenched in a fist. Blood dripped from his knuckles. Behind him stood 2 guards, both armed, both loyal to him. And Kale was still chained to the wall, but now his face was a mess of fresh bruises, his lips split and bleeding. Damon turned slowly. When he saw Ronan, he smiled. Ah, the loyal guardsman. Come to join the traitor? Ronan raised his sword. Step away from him, Damon laughed. Or what? You'll fight me? You and what army? Me. Lena stepped into the cell, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. Damon's eyes shifted to her. His smile widened. The servant girl, he said. How delightful. The one my brother was foolish enough to bond with. He rejected her, one of the guards muttered. Yes, he did. Very publicly, very cruelly. Damon tilted his head, studying Lena like she was an interesting insect. And yet here you are trying to save him. How touching. Let him go, Lena said. No, I don't think I will. You're torturing your own brother. I'm doing what's necessary. Kyle was never meant to be alpha. He's weak, soft. He cares more about honor than power. Damon's expression hardened. Our pack needs strength. I will give it to them. By beating your brother to death? By removing an obstacle. Ronan took a step forward. The alpha will hear about this. Will he? Damon gestured to the guards. These men are loyal to me, as are a dozen others throughout the manor. Do you really think you can get word to my father before I stop you? We have proof, Lena said. She pulled the letter from her pocket and held it up. Your own words. Planning this for months. Damon's smile faded. Give me that. No. Give it to me, or I'll have my men kill Ronan where he stands. The two guards moved forward, hands on their weapons. Ronan shifted his stance, ready to fight. Lena looked at Kyle. His eyes met hers. He shook his head slightly. Don't. But she couldn't just stand there. Couldn't let Ronan die for her mistake. She held out the letter. Damon snatched it from her hand and glanced at it. Then, without a word, he held it over the torch on the wall and let it burn. The paper curled and blackened, crumbling to ash. There, Damon said. No proof. Just the word of a servant and a disgraced guard against mine. He turned to his men. Take them to the other cell. Lock them up until I decide what to do with them. The guards moved forward. Ronan raised his sword, and Lena felt something snap inside her. It wasn't the bond. The bond was gone, shattered 3 days ago. This was something else, something deeper, older, like a door opening inside her chest, releasing something that had been locked away for years. Heat flooded through her veins, her vision sharpened. The world seemed to slow down, every detail suddenly crystal clear. One of the guards reached for her, and she moved. She didn't think, didn't plan. Her body just moved. Her hand shot out and caught the guard's wrist. She twisted, using his momentum against him, and sent him crashing into the wall. He hit hard enough to crack the stone. The second guard lunged at her with his blade. Lena ducked under the swing and drove her fist into his stomach. The impact sent him stumbling backward, wheezing. Ronan stared at her, his mouth open. Damon's eyes narrowed. What? Lena turned on him. She could feel it now. The power. It wasn't like the bond that had been warm, comforting. This was wild, dangerous. It hummed under her skin like lightning waiting to strike. Let him go, she said again. Her voice sounded different, stronger. Damon took a step back. Then he laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. So the little servant has claws after all, he said. How interesting. He pulled a knife from his belt and moved toward Kyle. But claws won't save you, or him. He pressed the blade against Kyle's throat. Drop whatever pathetic power you think you have, Damon said, or I'll slit his throat right now. Lena froze. The power inside her was screaming to be released, to tear Damon apart. But if she moved, if she did anything, Kyle would die. She could see it in Damon's eyes. He meant it. That's better, Damon said. He gestured to one of the guards, the one who was still conscious. Chain her, and Ronan too. The guard hesitated. Do it! The guard moved forward, pulling iron manacles from his belt. Lena didn't resist, didn't fight. She just watched as the guard locked the chains around her wrists. Ronan was chained next, his sword taken and tossed into the corner. Damon lowered the knife from Kyle's throat, but didn't step away. You've made this more complicated than it needed to be, he said. But no matter, I'll deal with all of you at once. A tragic accident, the heir and his loyal followers, killed by rogue wolves in the forest. He smiled. Such a shame. The Alpha will know you did this, Ronan said. Will he? By the time he returns from his patrol, it will already be done, and I will be the only heir left. Damon turned and walked toward the door. "Keep them here," he told the guard. "I'll return in an hour with more men. We'll take them into the forest then." "Yes, sir." Damon left, his footsteps echoing up the stairs. The guard watched him go, then turned to look at the three of them. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Kyle laughed. It was a weak, broken sound, but it was genuine. "Well," he said, "this is going great." Ronan shot him a look. "Not the time." "When is the time? We're about to be executed." "We're not dead yet." Lena tugged at the chains around her wrists. They were solid, heavy. No way she was breaking them with brute force. But that power was still there, simmering just under her skin. She closed her eyes and reached for it. It responded immediately, flooding through her like a river breaking through a dam. The chains grew hot. Then they began to glow. The guard's eyes widened. "What the—" The iron shattered. Pieces of broken chain clattered to the floor, still glowing red-hot. Lena opened her eyes. Ronan and Kyle were staring at her. The guard stumbled backward, his hand going to his sword. "Stay back!" Lena didn't move, just looked at him. "Leave," she said quietly. "Walk away. Forget you saw this." "I can't." "You can. You will." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, authority, the kind that made wolves lower their heads in submission. The guard hesitated, then he turned and ran. His footsteps echoed up the stairs, fading into silence. Lena turned to Ronan. "Your chains!" Ronan held out his wrists. Lena touched the iron, and the power responded again. The metal heated, then cracked, falling away in pieces. Ronan rubbed his wrists, staring at the broken chains. "How did you—" "I don't know." She moved to Kyle next. His chains were heavier, the cuffs reinforced, but when she touched them, they shattered just like the others. Kyle's arms dropped and he nearly collapsed. Ronan caught him, holding him upright. "Easy," Ronan muttered. "You've been hanging there for hours." "Days," Kyle corrected. His voice was hoarse. "Maybe longer. Lost track." Lena tore a strip from her cloak and pressed it against the gash on his temple. Kyle flinched but didn't pull away. "We need to move," Ronan said. That guard will tell Damon what happened." "Let him." Lena's voice was hard. "I'm done running." "Lena, he's been torturing Kyle for 3 months. He was going to kill us. All of us." She looked at Ronan. "I'm not running from him. Not anymore." "You can't fight him. He has half the pack." "Then we'll fight half the pack." Kyle grabbed her arm. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. "No," he said. "She's right. We don't run." Ronan looked between them. "You're both insane." "Probably," Kyle agreed. He pushed himself upright, swaying slightly. "But I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not letting my brother take what's mine." A slow smile spread across Ronan's face. "All right then. What's the plan?" Kyle looked at Lena. "We need the Alpha. My father. If he sees what Damon's done, if he sees the proof—" "We burned the letter," Lena said. "There's more than one kind of proof." Kale gestured to his own body. "The bruises, the cuts, the evidence of months of torture. He can't deny this." "Damon will say it was rogue wolves," Ronan pointed out, "or that you did it to yourself. Not if we have witnesses. Who's going to believe a servant and a guard against Damon?" Lena straightened. That power was still humming inside her, waiting, ready. "They'll believe me," she said quietly, "after they see what I can do." Kyle's eyes met hers. For the first time since the rejection, she saw something other than emptiness there. Respect. Maybe even hope. "Then let's give them a show," he said. They made it halfway to the main hall before Damon's men found them. 6 guards, all armed, all loyal to Damon. They blocked the corridor, swords drawn. "Stand down," the lead guard ordered, by order of Damon Draven. Kale stepped forward, despite the fact that he could barely stand. "Damon has no authority to give orders." "He will, soon. Not if I have anything to say about it." The guard's expression hardened. "Then you won't." He lunged. Ronan met him, their swords clashing with a screech of metal on metal. The other guards surged forward, and Lena stepped between them and Kyle. The power erupted. She felt it tear through her like a storm, wild and uncontrolled. Her vision went white, then red, then cleared. The guards were on the ground. All of them. Not dead, She could see their chests rising and falling, but unconscious, scattered across the corridor like broken dolls. Ronan lowered his sword, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Lena looked down at her hands. They were trembling, but not from fear, from exhilaration. I don't know, she said, but I think I'm starting to figure it out. Kael leaned against the wall, his face pale. The forest. It's tied to the forest, isn't it? Lena frowned. What do you mean? The old stories. About wolves who could channel the wild itself. Command it. Become something more than just pack. He looked at her. I thought they were legends, myths to scare children. They're not myths, Ronan said quietly. He was staring at Lena like he'd never seen her before. My grandmother used to tell stories about them. The wild touched. Wolves who could hear the forest speak, who drew power from the earth itself. That's impossible, Lena said. But even as she said it, she felt the truth of it. That connection, that pull. It wasn't the bond to Kael. It was a bond to something much, much older. The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above. Shouts. More guards, alerted by the noise. We're out of time, Kael said. The main hall. Now. They ran. Kael stumbled more than once, and Ronan had to half carry him. Lena led the way, that strange power still crackling under her skin, making her faster, stronger, more aware. The main hall was empty when they burst through the doors. No, not empty. Damon stood at the far end, surrounded by at least 20 guards. And next to him, looking confused and angry, was Alpha Marcus Draven himself, Kael's father. The Alpha was a massive man, even in his 50s, scarred and grizzled, with eyes like chips of ice. He looked between Kael and Damon, his expression unreadable. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Father, Kael said, his voice strained. Damon has been lying, Damon interrupted smoothly. He's been lying to you, Father. While you were on patrol, he staged a coup, tried to take the title by force. That's not true, Kael shouted. Look at him, Damon continued. Battered, desperate. He attacked me when I discovered his plan. I had to defend myself. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. Is this true, Kael? Kael opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was too weak, too broken. Lena stepped forward. It's a lie, she said. Her voice rang through the hall, clear and strong. Damon imprisoned Kael in the East Wing, tortured him for 3 months, tried to force him to give up his claim to the Alpha title. The Alpha turned to look at her. His gaze was heavy, crushing. And you are? Nobody, Damon said dismissively. A servant, the one Kael foolishly bonded with before coming to his senses and rejecting her. Then why should I believe her? The Alpha asked. Lena met his eyes. Because I can prove it. She reached inside herself to that well of power and pulled. The hall filled with light. It wasn't fire. Wasn't lightning. It was something else. Something primal and wild, like the forest itself had been condensed into raw energy. It poured out of Lena in waves, washing over the assembled guards, making them stumble back. And when it faded, the Alpha was staring at her with something that might have been awe. Wild touched, he breathed. Damon's face had gone pale. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Lena said quietly, and everything Kael said is true. Your son, your heir, has been tortured in your own home, while you were away, by him. She pointed at Damon. The Alpha turned to his eldest son. Is this true? Damon's composure cracked, just for a moment, but it was enough. He's weak, Damon snarled. He was never fit to lead. I did what you were too blind to do. You tortured your own brother. I did what was necessary. The Alpha's expression went cold, colder than Lena had ever seen. Ronan, he said quietly, take Damon to the holding cells. He will await trial before the council. No! Damon lunged, and Lena moved without thinking. The power erupted again, slamming into Damon like a physical force. He flew backward, crashing into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. When he slumped to the floor, he didn't get up. The hall went silent. Every eye was on Lena. She stood there breathing hard, her hands still glowing faintly. The Alpha approached her slowly. When he was close enough, he knelt, actually knelt. Forgive me, he said. I did not see what was happening in my own home. I did not protect my son. Lena didn't know what to say. The alpha of the northern pack was kneeling before her, a servant, a nobody. Rise, she said quietly. Please. He stood, but his eyes never left hers. You saved my son's life, he said. The pack owes you a debt. I don't want a debt. Then what do you want? Lena looked at Kyle. He was watching her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't name. I want him safe, she said. I want the people who hurt him held accountable. And I want… She paused. I want to stop hiding what I am. The alpha smiled. It was a fierce, proud thing. Then you shall have it, all of it. He turned to address the hall. This woman, Lena Voss, is under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me. His voice carried through the hall like thunder. And she will stand beside my son as his mate, if she chooses. Kale's eyes widened. Lena felt her breath catch. I rejected her, Kale said hoarsely. The bond is broken. Then forge a new one, the alpha said simply. One built on choice, not fate. He looked between them. If you both will it. Lena turned to Kyle. He was a mess. Bruised, beaten, barely able to stand, but his eyes were clear. I was wrong, he said quietly. I thought rejecting you would keep you safe. Instead, you saved me. He swallowed hard. If you'll have me, if you can forgive me, I would be honored to stand beside you, not as your alpha, as your equal. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. You hurt me, she said. I know. You broke me. I know. And you let me believe I was nothing. Kale flinched. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lena took a shaky breath. Then she closed the distance between them and took his hand. We'll talk about this later, she said. When you're not half dead. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Kyle laughed. It sounded painful, but genuine. I'll take it. The alpha clapped his hands. Someone get the healer and clear this hall. We have much to discuss. As the guards began to move, dragging Damon's unconscious form toward the cells, Lena felt Kyle's hand tighten around hers. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet, Lena said. This isn't over. And it wasn't, because as they left the hall, Lena could feel it. That power inside her, still churning, still growing. She'd unlocked something tonight, something dangerous and wild and utterly beyond her control. And somewhere deep in the forest, something answered. The call came from the forest at dawn. Lena woke to the sound of it, a howl that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite wind, wasn't quite anything she could name. It shivered through the stone walls of the manor and burrowed into her bones, pulling at something deep inside her chest. She sat up in the narrow bed, her old bed, the one she'd refused to leave even after the alpha had offered her better quarters, and pressed a hand to her ribs. The power was awake, restless. It had been 3 days since the confrontation in the hall. 3 days since Damon had been locked in the holding cells. 3 days since Kyle had looked at her like she was something more than a servant, more than a mistake. 3 days, and the whispers hadn't stopped. She could hear them even now, muffled through the walls. Servants talking in hushed voices about the girl who'd broken iron chains with her bare hands. Guards debating whether she was a threat or a weapon. Pack members speculating about what she was, what she could do, whether the alpha had made a mistake putting his protection on someone so unknown. Lena threw back the thin blanket and stood. Her muscles ached. They always did now, like the power was stretching her from the inside, remaking her into something that didn't quite fit her skin. She dressed quickly and left her room. The manor was stirring, early morning patrols changing shifts, servants hauling water and wood, the usual rhythms of pack life. But underneath it all, Lena felt the tension, thick and cloying like smoke. The pack was waiting for something, waiting to see what would happen next. She made her way through the corridors toward the east wing, not the cells where Damon was held, but the room where Kyle had been recovering under the healer's care. 2 guards stood outside his door. They straightened when they saw her approaching, their expressions carefully neutral. But Lena saw the way their eyes tracked her movements, wary and uncertain. He awake? Lena asked. One of the guards, a younger man with a fresh scar on his jaw, nodded. Been up since before sunrise. Keeps trying to get out of bed. Healer's about ready to tie him down. Sounds like him? She pushed open the door. Kale was standing by the window, one hand braced against the frame. He was shirtless, his torso still wrapped in bandages, the bruises fading from black to green and yellow. He turned when he heard her enter, and despite the obvious pain it caused him, he smiled. "You're supposed to be resting," Lena said. "So are you." "I rested for 3 whole days." Kale's mouth twitched, almost a real smile this time. 3 days isn't enough, not after what you did." "What we did?" "No." Kale crossed the room slowly, favoring his left side where the ribs were still cracked. Every step looked like agony, but he didn't stop until he was standing in front of her. You're the one who broke us out, who faced down Damon, who made the Alpha kneel." "He didn't kneel for me. He knelt because he felt guilty." "He knelt," Kyle said quietly, "because he recognized what you are, what you're becoming." Lena looked away. The power inside her stirred at his words, responding to something she didn't understand. "I don't know what I am. Wild touched, that's what my father called it. That's just a story, something to scare children." "So we're fated mates, until the bond snapped between us." Kale's voice softened. "The old world is waking up, Lena. The things we thought were myths, they're real, and you're proof of that." Lena flinched. She couldn't help it. The mention of the bond always hurt, even now, like probing a wound that hadn't quite healed. Kale saw it, and his expression crumpled. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "It's fine." "It's not." He reached out like he was going to touch her arm, then thought better of it. His hand dropped back to his side. "What I did to you, the rejection, there's no excuse for it. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just a coward. You were trying to survive. I was trying to avoid a hard choice. And you paid the price." Kale's voice went rough. "I broke you in front of everyone. Made you believe you were nothing, and then you turned around and saved my life anyway. I don't know how to make that right." "You don't have to make it right. You just have to not do it again." They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them like a physical thing. Then the howl came again, closer this time, louder. It rattled the window glass and made the hairs on Lena's arms stand up. Kale's head snapped toward the window. "What is that?" Lena moved to stand beside him. Outside, the forest pressed close to the manor walls, dark and dense even in the growing light. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches reaching toward the stone like grasping fingers. "I don't know," she said. "But I've been hearing it all morning, like something's calling." "To you?" She nodded slowly. "I think so. It's like there's a rope tied around my ribs, and something's pulling on the other end, trying to drag me out there." Kyle's jaw tightened. "My father needs to hear about this. Your father has enough problems. Half the council wants Damon executed. The other half wants him exiled, and everyone's watching to see if you're strong enough to actually lead." "I am." "Then prove it. Figure out what's calling from the forest before it becomes everyone's problem, not just mine." Before Kale could respond, the door burst open. Ronan stood in the doorway, breathing hard. His armor was askew, his face pale. "We've got a situation." Kale straightened despite the obvious pain it caused him. "What kind of situation?" "Border Patrol found 3 wolves dead at the eastern perimeter, torn apart. Whatever did it wasn't pack." "Rogues?" "Worse." Ronan's expression was grim. "The bodies are wrong. Twisted. Like something dragged them into the forest and they came back changed." Lena's blood ran cold. The power inside her recoiled, pulling back like a hand jerked away from fire. "Changed how?" "You need to see for yourself, both of you. The Alphas already assembled the council." They followed Ronan through the manor and out into the courtyard. Dawn had broken fully now, pale light washing over the stones. A crowd had gathered near the main gate. Guards, servants, pack members all pressed together, muttering and whispering. The Alpha stood in the center, arms crossed, staring down at 3 bodies laid out on the stones. Lena pushed through the crowd, Kale right behind her. The whispers followed them. "That's her, the one who broke the chains with her bears." "Not natural, can't be." "What if she did this?" Lena ignored them and focused on the bodies. Ronan had been right. They were wrong. They were still wolves, or they had been. But now their limbs were bent at angles that didn't make sense, their spines curved backward, their jaws elongated into something that looked more reptilian than canine. Their eyes were open but empty. Not dead empty, just empty, like whatever had been inside them had been scooped out and replaced with something else. And their teeth. Lena's stomach turned. Their teeth had continued growing even after death. They jutted from the wolves' mouths at random angles, some piercing through the cheeks from the inside, others curving back toward the throat. "What did this?" someone in the crowd whispered. "Forest sickness," another voice answered. "My grandmother told stories about it. Trees that bleed, animals that forget how to die. Stories aren't real. Look at them and tell me that's not real." "Enough!" The Alpha's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. The crowd fell silent. They were on patrol 2 hours ago, checking the eastern border near the old growth. When they didn't report back, we sent a search party, found them like this scattered in a clearing. And one more thing. He gestured to a guard standing off to the side. The man stepped forward, his face ashen. His arm was bandaged from wrist to shoulder, the cloth already soaked through with blood. "This is Garrett," the Alpha said. "He was with them. Only survivor." Garrett swayed on his feet. Another guard steadied him. "Tell them what you told me," the Alpha ordered. Garrett's voice came out as a croak. "We were doing our rounds. Everything was normal. Then we heard singing coming from deeper in the forest. Beautiful, like nothing I've ever heard." "So you followed it," Kyle said. It wasn't a question. Garrett nodded. "We shouldn't have. I know that now. But it was like we couldn't stop ourselves. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, and then we found the clearing." His voice broke. There was something there, in the center. I couldn't see it clearly. It was like my eyes kept sliding off it, like my brain couldn't make sense of what I was looking at. "What happened to the others?" Lena asked quietly. "It touched them, just reached out and touched them. And they started screaming, their bodies twisted, bones breaking, flesh tearing. I ran. It tried to grab me too, but I made it to the tree line." He held up his bandaged arm. "Barely." The Alpha's expression was carved from stone. "The healer says the wound won't heal. The flesh around it keeps dying, spreading up his arm. If we can't stop it, we'll have to amputate." A murmur ran through the crowd, fear, thick and palpable. Lena knelt beside one of the bodies. Up close, it was worse. The wolf's mouth was open in a permanent snarl, and she could see the teeth, too many, too sharp, still pushing through the gums. The flesh around them was black and rotting. She reached out, fingers hovering over the twisted flesh, and the power inside her recoiled violently. She jerked her hand back, her heart racing. It felt like she'd put her hand near a flame. The wrongness radiating from the body was almost physical. "Don't touch them," she said sharply. Everyone turned to look at her. "Why not?" the Alpha asked. "Because whatever did this, it's still in them. I can feel it. It's like..." She struggled to find the words. "Like poison, but alive. And hungry." The crowd shifted uneasily. Whispers rose and fell. "She's making it up. She's wild-touched. She knows things we don't... How can we trust her? Maybe she brought this on us." "I said enough." The Alpha's voice cracked like thunder. The whispers died. "If Lena says don't touch them, we don't touch them. Burn the bodies. Now. And someone get Garrett to the healer before that corruption spreads further." 2 guards moved forward with torches. They touched the flames to the first body. The corpse went up like it had been soaked in oil. The fire was wrong too, burning green and black instead of orange, the flames crackling with an oily sheen. The smoke that rose from it was thick and acrid, and when it hit Lena's lungs, she tasted metal and rot and something else, something ancient and full of malice. She stumbled backward, coughing. Kyle caught her, his hands on her shoulders. "Easy." "It's spreading," Lena gasped. Her throat felt raw, scorched. "Whatever it is, it's in the forest, and it's getting stronger." The Alpha turned to face her fully. His eyes were hard, searching. "You've felt this before." It wasn't a question. Lena nodded. "Since the night I broke the chains, since I..." She hesitated, aware of all the eyes on her. "Since the power woke up. It's like something noticed me, and now it won't leave me alone. Every night I hear it calling. Every morning it's closer." "The forest is old," the Alpha said quietly. His voice carried to the whole crowd. Older than the packs, older than the manor, older than the territory itself. There are things in the deep woods that our ancestors learned to avoid. Boundaries we don't cross, rules we don't break. But if those things are coming here, if they're hunting my wolves, then we hunt them back, Kyle said. His voice was steady despite the pain he was clearly in. We can't just wait for whatever's out there to pick us off one by one. No. The Alpha shook his head. You're barely healed, and we don't know what we're facing. Then we find out. We track it, we kill it, and we bring proof back that the threat is ended. Kael straightened, pulling away from the guard supporting him. Despite the bandages and the bruises, he looked every inch the Alpha's heir. Let me lead a hunting party. I'll take volunteers. We'll find this thing and end it. The Alpha studied his son for a long moment. The crowd had gone silent, everyone watching this exchange. And if you can't kill it, the Alpha asked quietly, then we'll know what we're dealing with, and we'll come back with enough information for you to make a real plan. The Alpha's mouth thinned. Then he looked at Lena. You feel it. The thing in the forest. Can you track it? Lena's throat tightened. The pull was there right now, constant and insistent, like a fishhook buried in her sternum, tugging her toward the trees. I think so. Yes. Then you go with him. You and Ronan and whoever else Kyle chooses. The Alpha's expression was hard. But if it's too dangerous, if you can't kill it, you run. No heroics, no last stands. You come back alive. Understand? The pack needs its heir. Kale nodded. Understood. Good. You leave at midday. That gives you time to prepare and gather supplies. The Alpha raised his voice. The rest of you, double the patrols. No one goes into the forest alone. No one crosses the eastern boundary without my express permission. And if you hear singing, run, Garrett said hoarsely. Just run. The crowd began to disperse, muttering and uneasy. The Alpha strode away, already barking orders to the guards about reinforcing the perimeter and posting watches on the walls. Lena stood there, staring at the ashes where the bodies had burned. The green-black smoke was still rising, dissipating into the morning air. Something was very, very wrong, and she had a terrible feeling it was connected to her. They assembled in the armory at noon. Kyle, moving stiffly but determined, his face pale but his eyes clear. Ronan, checking and rechecking his weapons with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen real combat. And 4 other wolves, all experienced hunters, all volunteers. Lena felt out of place among them. They wore leather armor reinforced with metal studs, carried blades and bows and long knives. She had a servant's dress, worn boots, and a power she barely understood and couldn't fully control. Ronan noticed her standing apart from the group. He crossed to her, a bundle in his hands. Here, can't have you going into the forest dressed like that. He handed her the bundle. Inside was a leather tunic, thick pants, and a belt with a sheathed knife. I don't know how to use a knife, Lena said. Then stay in the center of the group. Let us handle the fighting. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? One of the other hunters spoke up, a woman named Sarah with a scar across her cheek and eyes like chips of flint. Because from where I'm standing, you're a servant who got lucky with some weird magic. That doesn't make you a hunter. Lena met her gaze evenly. No, but whatever's out there, it's calling to me. And if you want to find it, you need me. Sarah snorted. Great. We're following a servant into the forest because she hears voices. What could possibly go wrong? I don't hear voices, Lena said. Her voice was calm, but underneath she felt the power stir. I feel it, like a pull. Like something's got a rope tied around my ribs and it's dragging me toward it. And if you don't want to follow me, you're welcome to stay behind. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Careful, girl. You might have the Alpha's favor now, but that doesn't make you pack. It doesn't make you one of us. Enough, Kyle said. He stepped between them, his voice hard. Lena saved my life. She exposed Damon's betrayal. And she's wild-touched, something none of us understand but all of us saw. So if she says the forest is calling to her, we listen. Clear? Sarah held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Fine. But if she gets us killed, I'm haunting you. Noted. Kale turned to the rest of the group. We move fast and we move quiet. Stay together. Watch each other's backs. And if I give the order to retreat, you retreat. No arguments. Understood? A chorus of agreement. Lena changed quickly in a side room, pulling on the leather gear Ronan had given her. It fit better than she expected. Someone had taken the time to find her size. The knife felt strange on her hip, heavy and unfamiliar. When she emerged, Kael was waiting. He'd armored up too, though she could see the strain it put on his healing ribs. "You sure about this?" she asked quietly. "No, but we don't have a choice." He touched her arm briefly. "Stay close to me out there. Please." "I will." They set out through the eastern gate just after noon, moving in a loose formation with Kael at the front and Lena in the center. The guards on the wall watched them go in silence. The forest swallowed them almost immediately. The trees closed in overhead, thick canopy blocking out the sun. Within minutes, the temperature dropped. The light turned green and gray, filtered through layers of leaves and branches. And the pull grew stronger. Lena could feel it like a physical thing now, that hook in her chest dragging her deeper. She didn't fight it, just followed. They walked for hours. Nobody spoke. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no small animals rustling in the brush. Just the sound of their footsteps crunching on dead leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The wrongness pressed in from all sides. It was in the air, thick and cloying. In the trees, which seemed to lean away from their path. In the absolute absence of life. "This doesn't feel right," one of the hunters muttered. A man named Cord with graying hair and nervous hands. "It's not," Ronan agreed. He had his sword drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We should have seen game by now. Tracks at least. Scat. Signs of life. But there's nothing. It's like everything fled." "They're avoiding something," Kael said. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "Something big. Something that scares them more than we do." The fourth hunter, a quiet man named Tomas, stopped walking. "Anyone else smell that?" Lena breathed in. Underneath the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves, there was something else. Sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. "Death," Sarah said flatly. "That's what death smells like when it's been sitting for a while." They pushed forward more cautiously now, weapons drawn, every sense alert. The smell grew stronger. And then Lena stopped walking. The pull had changed. Instead of dragging her forward, it was now pushing, hard, like the forest itself was trying to shove her away. "We're close," she said quietly. "How do you know?" Sarah asked. "Because it doesn't want us here anymore." The hunters spread out slightly, forming a defensive line. Kael moved to stand beside Lena, his sword raised. "Stay behind me," he said. "I'm not helpless." "I know, but humor me." They pushed forward through a thick stand of trees, branches catching at their clothes and hair, and emerged into a clearing. No, not a clearing, a wound. The trees around the edge were dead, their bark black and peeling, their branches bare. The ground was churned up, the soil dark and wet, even though it hadn't rained in days. And in the center, half buried in the earth like something trying to pull itself up from below, was something that might have been a wolf once, but not anymore. It was massive, twice the size of any wolf Lena had ever seen, maybe 3 times. Its body was twisted, limbs bent at impossible angles, its spine arched backward so far its head nearly touched its tail. The flesh was rotting, sloughing off in places to reveal bone underneath, but it was still moving, twitching, shuddering, like it was trying to stand. "What in the hell?" Ronan breathed. The thing's head snapped toward them. Its eyes were empty, black pits that reflected nothing, absorbed everything. And then it screamed. The sound was inhuman, a shriek that rattled Lena's bones and made her ears ring. It was agony and rage and hunger all compressed into one terrible note. The hunters stumbled backward, hands clapped over their ears. The creature lunged. It moved wrong, sideways and jerking, like its body couldn't remember how limbs were supposed to work. But it was fast, impossibly fast. Ronan met it head on, his sword flashing in the dim light. The blade bit deep into the creature's shoulder and stuck. The flesh around the wound bubbled and hissed, smoke rising from it like burning meat. The creature's blood was black and thick, more like tar than anything living. Ronan tried to pull the sword free, his face twisted with effort, but the creature twisted, wrenching the weapon from his hands. It lashed out with a clawed limb, catching him across the chest. Ronan flew backward, hitting a tree hard enough to shake leaves from the branches. He slumped to the ground and didn't move. The other hunters rushed forward, weapons raised. Sarah was fast. She ducked under a swipe of the creature's claws and drove her blade into its side. Cord came from the other direction with an axe, burying it deep in the thing's flank. The creature shrieked again and spun. Its tail, or what passed for a tail, a writhing appendage covered in bone spurs, caught Sarah across the throat. Blood sprayed. She went down clutching her neck, eyes wide with shock. Cord tried to pull his axe free. The creature's jaws, elongated and full of those terrible teeth, clamped down on his shoulder. There was a wet crunch. Cord screamed once, then went silent as the creature shook him like a dog with a rabbit. When it dropped him, he didn't get up. Tomas was backing away, his face white. "We need to run!" The creature's head whipped toward him. It lunged. Kale stepped between them, his sword raised. "Go! Get back to the manor." "I'm not leaving." "That's an order!" Tomas ran. The creature hit Kale like a battering ram. They went down in a tangle of limbs and teeth and claws. Kale was shouting something, but Lena couldn't hear over the creature's shrieking and the blood pounding in her ears. The creature's jaws opened wide, aiming for Kale's throat, and Lena let the power loose. It erupted from her in a wave of raw force, slamming into the creature and driving it off Kale. The thing shrieked, its body convulsing, but it didn't stop. It came at her instead, faster now, limbs scrabbling over the torn earth. Lena reached deeper, pulling more power, more strength. The energy burned through her veins like liquid fire. The creature was almost on her, and something in the forest answered her call. It wasn't the creature. This was something else, something vast and old and aware. She felt it wrap around her like a hand closing over a flame, feeding the power, amplifying it until she thought she might burst apart from the force of it. The light that poured out of her was blinding, pure white, tinged with green like new leaves in spring. When it faded, the creature was gone, just ash and smoke and scorched earth where it had been standing. Lena stood in the center of the clearing, her hand still glowing faintly, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Kyle was on his knees a few feet away, staring at her with something like awe, or fear, maybe both. Ronan was stirring, groaning as he pushed himself upright. Sarah and Cord were dead. Their bodies lay sprawled in the dirt, blood pooling beneath them, and the forest around them was utterly, completely silent. "What did you do?" Kyle whispered. Lena looked down at her hands. The power was still there, simmering just beneath her skin. But it felt different now. Controlled. Focused. Like she'd found the rhythm of it, learned how to channel it without being consumed. "I don't know," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant. "But something helped me. Something in the forest." "What something?" Before she could answer, the trees around them began to move, not sway in the wind, move. The trunks bent and twisted, branches reaching down like grasping fingers. The ground beneath their feet trembled, dirt and leaves shifting. And from the shadows between the trees, shapes began to emerge. Wolves. But not pack wolves. These were different, wild, feral. Their eyes glowed with the same strange light that had poured from Lena's hands, green, white, and ancient. There were dozens of them, maybe more. They kept coming, slipping out of the shadows, forming a circle around the clearing. Silent, watchful. Kale struggled to his feet, his sword raised. His hands were shaking. "Lena, don't move," she said quietly. "Nobody move." Ronan had his blade out too, his face pale. "What are they?" "Wild wolves," Lena breathed. "The ones from the old stories. The ones that don't belong to any pack." One of the wild wolves stepped forward. It was larger than the others, its fur silver-white like moonlight, its eyes the color of frost. It moved with a grace that made the pack wolves look clumsy by comparison. It looked directly at Lena, and then, slowly, it lowered its head. One by one, the other wolves followed suit. Dozens of heads bowing, dozens of wild, untamed creatures showing submission. Not to the alpha, not to the pack, to her. Lena felt her breath catch. This can't be." "They're submitting to you," Kale said. His voice was barely audible. "The wild wolves. They're bowing to you." "That's impossible. Look at them. She did, and she realized he was right. The wild wolves, creatures that answered to no pack, no alpha, no law but their own, were showing her deference. The silver wolf stepped closer. It moved slowly, carefully, like approaching something precious and fragile. When it was close enough that Lena could feel its breath on her skin, it lowered itself completely to the ground at her feet. The message was clear. Not submission, allegiance. They want you to lead them, Kael breathed. I can't. I don't know how. You already are. Lena looked around the clearing, at the dead hunters lying in pools of blood, at Ronan barely able to stand, at Kael wounded and exhausted, at the wild wolves waiting for her command. She'd come into the forest looking for answers about what was killing pack wolves. Instead, she'd found an army. But before she could process that, before she could even begin to understand what it meant, the ground beneath them split open. Not a crack, not a fissure, a chasm. It tore through the clearing like a knife through cloth, the earth dropping away into darkness that seemed to have no bottom. The wild wolves scattered, yelping and snarling. Kael grabbed Lena's arm, pulling her back from the edge. Ronan stumbled, nearly fell in, caught himself at the last second. And from the depths of the chasm, something rose. It was shadow-given form, massive and writhing, with too many limbs and too many mouths and eyes that burned like coals in a dying fire. This was what the creature in the clearing had been trying to become, a pale, failed imitation. This was the source, the thing that had been calling to Lena all along. It spoke, not with a voice, but directly into her mind, a pressure that made her skull feel like it was cracking, splitting open. Mine. Lena's knees buckled. The power inside her surged in response, wild and terrified, recognizing something in this shadow thing that it feared. You belong to the wild. You always have. You opened the door when you broke the iron. You let me see you. No. You cannot refuse. You cannot run. You are part of me now, and I am part of you. Soon, all of this will be mine. The pack, the territory, the world beyond. The shadow thing reached for her with a limb made of smoke and darkness and hunger. Kael threw himself between them, his sword raised, and the shadow swatted him aside like an insect. He hit a tree with a sickening crack and crumpled to the ground, not moving. Kael! Lena screamed. The shadow thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass and dying stars and the last breath of the world. He cannot protect you. Nothing can. You are mine, wild touched, and through you I will consume everything. The limb wrapped around Lena's wrist. The moment it touched her, pain exploded through her body, white hot and all-consuming, like being burned from the inside out. She felt the shadow thing burrowing into her mind, her chest, her very soul, trying to hollow her out and fill the empty space with itself. She tried to fight, tried to pull the power up to defend herself. But the shadow thing was laughing. That power is mine. I gave it to you. Did you think it was yours to keep? And Lena realized with horror that it was right. The power she'd been using, the strength that had broken the chains, killed the creature, saved Kael. It had all come from this thing. The shadow thing was the wild, the ancient force beneath the forest, the primal chaos that existed before packs, before civilization, before anything resembling order, and it wanted her. Lena felt herself slipping, felt her consciousness fraying at the edges, dissolving into the shadow thing's hunger. She was going to die here, or worse, become something like that creature in the clearing, twisted and empty and wrong, a puppet for this ancient evil. But then she felt it, the bond, not the bond to Kael, that was still broken, still shattered, irreparable. This was different, older, deeper, the bond to the wild wolves. They'd bowed to her, chosen her, given her their allegiance. And allegiance, Lena realized, was a two-way street. She stopped fighting the shadow thing's invasion. Instead, she reached out, not with the power it had given her, but with something else. She reached for the pack. The wild wolves. Her wolves. And they answered. The silver wolf lunged first, teeth bared, a snarl ripping from its throat. Then the others followed, dozens of them, a living wave of fur and fangs and fury crashing into the shadow thing. It shrieked, the limb around Lena's wrist loosening. She tore free and fell to her knees, gasping. The wild wolves tore at the shadow thing, ripping pieces from it. Every time their teeth sank in, light flared, the same green-white light that had poured from Lena earlier. The shadow thing was screaming now, thrashing, trying to shake them off. And Lena understood. The wild wolves weren't hers to command. She was theirs to anchor. They'd chosen her not to lead them, but to give them form and purpose against the darkness that threatened to consume everything. She was the bridge between the pack and the wild, between order and chaos, between what was and what could be. And that meant she could channel both. Lena stood, her legs shaking. The power flooded through her again, but this time it wasn't just hers. It was theirs, all of them. A chorus of strength and fury and will. She raised both hands, and the shadow thing exploded. The blast knocked her off her feet, sent the wild wolves tumbling backward. The ground shook, trees cracked and fell. When Lena opened her eyes, the chasm was gone, sealed over like it had never been. The clearing was silent except for the sound of breathing, hers, the wolves'. Ronan's ragged gasps from where he'd collapsed against a tree. The wild wolves stood around her, panting and bloody, but alive. And Kyle, he was moving. Slowly, painfully, but moving. Lena stumbled over to him and dropped to her knees. "Don't you dare die on me." Kale coughed, blood on his lips. "Wasn't planning on it." His eyes focused on her face. "You did it. You killed it." "We killed it," Lena corrected. She looked at the wild wolves, at the silver wolf watching her with those ancient eyes. "All of us." Kale followed her gaze. His eyes widened. "They're still here." "Yeah. They're yours now." "No," Lena said quietly. "We're each other's." Ronan groaned from somewhere nearby. "Can someone, please, stop the bleeding before I pass out?" They made it back to the manor as the sun was setting, painting the sky red and gold. The guards at the gate nearly attacked when they saw the wild wolves, weapons raised, voices shouting. But Kyle, barely conscious and leaning heavily on Lena, raised his hand. "Stand down," he ordered. His voice was weak, but it carried authority. "They're with us." The guards hesitated, looking to each other uncertainly. "I said stand down!" Slowly, reluctantly, the weapons lowered. The wild wolves followed Lena right up to the gates and threw them into the courtyard. They moved as one, silent and eerie, their eyes still glowing faintly in the gathering dusk. The Alpha met them in the courtyard, surrounded by guards and council members. His expression was unreadable. "We were attacked," Kyle said before his father could speak. Blood stained his shirt, and he swayed on his feet. "The eastern clearing. 2 hunters are dead, but we killed the thing that's been hunting our wolves, destroyed it completely." "And them?" The Alpha gestured to the wild wolves, who'd arranged themselves in a semicircle behind Lena, watchful and protective. "They're with Lena," Kyle said. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have, Father." The Alpha's eyes shifted to Lena. She met his gaze steadily, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to lower her eyes, to submit. But she wasn't just a servant anymore, and they both knew it. "What happened out there?" the Alpha asked. His voice was quiet, dangerous. Lena took a breath. "The wild chose me. I chose them back. And together, we destroyed the thing that was corrupting your territory. The wild doesn't choose anyone. The wild is chaos, madness. Maybe it was, but not anymore." Lena felt the power stirring inside her, felt the presence of the wild wolves at her back. "The rules are changing. The old world is waking up, and we either adapt or we die." The courtyard had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching this exchange, waiting. The Alpha stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Very well. The wild wolves may stay for now, but they answer to you, and you answer to me. Clear?" "Understood." "Good." The Alpha looked at Kale, and his expression softened slightly. "Get to the healer, both of you, and someone tend to Ronan before he bleeds out." As they turned to go, Lena heard the whispers starting, louder this time, more fearful, more awed. The servant girl who commanded wild wolves, the nobody who'd killed a shadow thing, the wild touched who was changing everything. And deep beneath the manor, in the holding cells, Damon heard the whispers too. He sat in the darkness, chains around his wrists, and smiled. Because while everyone had been watching Lena fight monsters in the forest, no one had been watching him. And he'd just carved a summoning circle into the stone floor with his own blood. The shadow thing wasn't dead. It couldn't die. It could only be banished. And Damon was about to call it back. The summoning circle pulsed with a sickly green light, casting shadows that writhed across the cell walls like living things. Damon knelt in the center, his wrists still raw from the chains they'd removed just hours ago. The guards had been thorough when they'd locked him up, taken his weapons, his belt, even his boots. But they hadn't thought to search for the small iron nail he'd kept hidden in the hem of his shirt for weeks. It had been enough. The circle was crude, drawn in his own blood mixed with dirt scraped from the floor. The symbols were half-remembered from old texts he'd found in his father's study years ago, forbidden knowledge that the Alpha thought he'd destroyed. But Damon had always been good at finding secrets, at keeping them. He pressed his bleeding palm to the center of the circle and spoke the words. They came easier than they should have, like his tongue had been shaped for this language, like he'd been speaking it in his sleep for years. They tasted like ash and rot, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he was so close. The girl had destroyed his first attempt at power, humiliated him in front of the entire pack, turned his own father against him, though that had started long before she arrived. But she'd made a mistake. She'd left him alive. The circle flared brighter. The temperature in the cell dropped so fast Damon's breath came out in white clouds. Frost spread across the stone floor, creeping toward the walls in crystalline patterns. And from the darkness in the corner, the deepest shadow where no light from the corridor torches could reach, something stirred. "Yes," Damon whispered. His voice was hoarse, eager. "Yes, come to me. Give me what she has. Give me the power to take back what's mine." The shadow began to take shape. Limbs, a body, a face that shifted and changed, never settling on one form. It spoke directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "You summoned. We answer, but power has a price." "I'll pay it, whatever it is. Your body, your will, your very soul. We will share it all." Damon hesitated for just a moment. Then he thought of Kyle standing in the hall, wounded but victorious. Thought of Lena with her glowing hands and her wild wolves. Thought of his father kneeling before a servant girl. "Done," he said. "Take it. Take all of it. Just give me the power to destroy them." The shadow smiled, or at least Damon thought it smiled. Hard to tell when the face kept shifting. "As you wish." It lunged forward, pouring into him through his mouth, his nose, his eyes. Damon screamed, but no sound came out. He felt it filling him, pushing his consciousness aside, making room for itself in the spaces between his thoughts. And then the pain started. Upstairs in the healer's chamber, Lena jerked awake. Pain lanced through her head, sharp and sudden, like someone had driven a spike through her skull. She gasped, pressing her hands to her temples. The healer, an older woman named Mira with silver-streaked hair and hands that never stopped moving, looked up from where she was grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. "What is it? The wounds bothering you?" "I don't—" Lena's vision blurred. For a moment, she wasn't in the healer's chamber anymore. She was somewhere dark and cold, watching Damon kneel in a circle of blood, watching shadow pour into him like water into a cup. "Something's wrong. You need rest. You pushed yourself too hard in the forest. Your body's trying to tell you, No." Lena swung her legs off the bed, ignoring the wave of dizziness that threatened to knock her sideways. Her ribs protested, her muscles screamed, but she forced herself to stand. "It's Damon. He's doing something bad." Mira frowned, setting down the mortar. "He's locked in the holding cells, under guard. Triple-checked the locks myself after what he did to Kyle. He can't—" The scream cut her off. It came from somewhere below, echoing through the stone floors, raw and terrified and abruptly silenced, like someone had cut the throat mid-shriek. Lena was moving before she could think, running for the door. Mira called after her, something about opening her wounds, but the words didn't register. The corridors were chaos, guards running, shouting orders that contradicted each other, servants pressing themselves against walls, eyes wide with fear. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying. Lena followed the commotion down into the bowels of the manor. The holding cells were in the oldest part of the structure, carved directly into the bedrock centuries ago. Cold and damp and dark, even at midday. A crowd had gathered at the entrance to the cell block. Lena pushed through them, using elbows and determination, and the fact that people flinched away from her now, unsure what she was, what she could do. The guard's dead. Doors still locked from the outside. How could... Saw his face, saw what did it, not natural. Where's the Alpha? Someone get the Alpha. The guard lay sprawled on the floor just inside the corridor, his throat torn open. Not cut, torn, like something with claws had ripped it out. Blood pooled beneath him, still warm, still spreading. His eyes stared at nothing, wide with terror. Beyond him, at the end of the corridor, Damon's cell door stood open. Not broken, not forced, not picked, just open. Like something had walked through solid iron without bothering with locks or bars or the physical laws that govern normal reality. Alpha Marcus stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking most of the view inside. When he saw Lena, he gestured sharply. You, get in here. Now. She stepped over the guard's body, trying not to look at his face, at the expression frozen there. Failed. The image burned itself into her memory anyway. The cell was empty. The chains that had held Damon lay broken on the floor, the metal twisted and warped like it had been heated to melting point and then frozen again. The walls were covered in frost, patterns that looked almost like writing in some language Lena didn't recognize. And in the center, drawn in blood that was already turning black, was the circle. It was still glowing faintly, the symbols pulsing like a heartbeat, like something alive. What is this? The Alpha demanded. His voice was hard, controlled, but Lena could hear the edge underneath, fear, actual fear. What am I looking at? Lena knelt beside the circle, careful not to touch it. The power inside her recoiled from it violently, the same way it had recoiled from the twisted wolf corpses, from the creature in the forest. A summoning. He called something back, used his own blood to open a doorway. The thing from the forest? The shadow? Part of it. Maybe all of it. I don't know. She looked up at him. But whatever he brought through, it took him, merged with him, and now it's loose somewhere in the manor. The Alpha's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. How do we kill it? I don't know if we can. Not while it's wearing him. Damon's still in there somewhere, and if we kill the shadow, we kill my son. Yes. The Alpha stood there for a moment, his expression carved from stone. Then he turned and strode out of the cell, his voice carrying down the corridor. Lock this level down. No one in or out without my permission. Someone find Kael and get him to the council chamber. And spread the word. Everyone stays inside. No one goes anywhere alone. Lena followed him out, her mind racing. The shadow thing had been powerful in the forest, strong enough to twist wolves and tear open the earth. But it had been formless there, chaotic. Now it had a body. Damon's body. A host that could think, plan, move through the manor without raising immediate alarm. That made it infinitely more dangerous. They found Kael in the armory, pulling on leather armor over his bandaged torso. He moved stiffly, each motion clearly painful, but his hands were steady. I heard the screaming, he said when they entered. What happened? Damon escaped, the Alpha said. Summoned the shadow thing back and let it possess him. Killed a guard on the way out. Now he's somewhere in the manor and we need to find him before... The window behind Kael exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the room. Kael dove sideways, rolling to his feet with a sword in his hand. The Alpha shifted mid-stride, his human form blurring into a wolf the size of a horse. And through the shattered window came Damon. Except it wasn't Damon anymore. Not entirely. His body was still his, same height, same build, same features. But the eyes were wrong. Black pits that reflected nothing, absorbed everything. His skin had taken on a grayish cast, and when he smiled, his teeth were too sharp, too many. Shadow leaked from his pores like smoke. "Hello, Father," he said. His voice was layered, multiple tones speaking at once. Damon's voice underneath, but something else on top. Something ancient and hungry. "Miss me?" The Alpha Wolf snarled, a sound that rattled the weapons on the walls. Damon laughed. "Still the beast, still relying on brute force. That's why you were always going to fail. That's why I'm going to win." He turned his black pit eyes on Lena. "And you, the wild touched, the bridge. The one who broke the chains and opened the door. He spread his arms, shadow writhing around him like living things. Thank you, by the way. Without you, I never could have brought it back. Never could have become this. Lena felt the power inside her surge, responding to the threat. But she forced it down, forced herself to think. You're not Damon anymore. Wrong. I'm more Damon than I've ever been. All the parts of me I had to hide, had to suppress. They're free now. The anger, the hate, the hunger for what was denied me. The Shadow Daemon took a step forward. Guards burst through the door behind them, weapons raised, but the alpha wolf growled and they froze. He invited me in, you see. Begged me, actually. He wanted power so badly. Wanted to prove he was worthy of the title they gave to his little brother. You're using him, Kyle said. His voice was steady despite the sword trembling in his grip. You're a parasite wearing my brother's face. I'm a partner. We made a deal. Power for service. And my first service, the Shadow Daemon's smile widened impossibly, is to destroy the little servant girl who ruined everything, and everyone who helped her. It moved, faster than anything that size should move, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. The alpha wolf lunged to intercept, jaws snapping. The Shadow Daemon caught the alpha by the throat mid-leap and slammed him into the floor. Stone cracked. The alpha wolf yelped, an undignified sound Lena had never thought she'd hear from him, and went still. Father! Kael charged, sword raised. The Shadow Daemon backhanded him almost casually. Kael flew across the room, crashed through a weapons rack, and lay there groaning. It turned to Lena. Just you and me now, the way it should have been from the start. Lena's power exploded outward without conscious thought, a wave of raw force that hit the Shadow Daemon square in the chest. It stumbled backward, Daemon's face twisting in pain, but then it laughed. Yes! More! Feed me your rage, your fear. The shadow writhed around it, absorbing the energy. Don't you understand? Every time you use that power, you make me stronger, because that power came from me. It's mine. You're just borrowing it. And Lena realized her mistake. Every attack she made, it absorbed, grew stronger from. She was fighting herself, fighting with weapons the enemy had forged. The wild wolves burst through the door, the silver one in the lead. They'd been resting in the courtyard, but the bond had called them. They felt her fear, her desperation. They attacked as one, a wave of teeth and fury. They tore into the Shadow Daemon from all sides, ripping at flesh that smoked and hissed where their fangs sank in. But for every piece they tore away, more shadow poured in to fill the gaps. The thing was regenerating faster than they could damage it, using Daemon's body as a framework, an anchor. The Shadow Daemon grabbed the silver wolf by the scruff and threw it like a rag doll. The wolf hit the wall with a sickening crack and slid to the floor, whimpering. Lena felt that like a physical blow. The bond between her and the wild wolves wasn't just metaphorical. It was real, visceral. When they hurt, she hurt. She fell to her knees, gasping. The Shadow Daemon stalked toward her, wearing Daemon's face like a mask. This is over. You're going to submit to me. Stop fighting. Let me in. Become my vessel like he did. And together, we'll consume this pack, this territory, everything beyond. Never, Lena managed. Then I'll kill everyone you care about until you break. It looked at Kael, who was trying to push himself upright, blood running down his face. Starting with the brother who took everything from us. It raised a clawed hand, and Ronan burst through the door with a dozen guards behind him. Archers, he bellowed. Now! Arrows filled the air, a storm of wood and iron. Most bounced off the Shadow Daemon harmlessly, but a few found purchase in flesh, in the parts that were still Daemon's body. The Shadow Daemon screamed, a sound of rage more than pain, and turned toward this new threat. That moment of distraction was all Lena needed. She closed her eyes and reached deep, past the corrupted power the Shadow Thing had tried to claim as its own. Reached for something older, something that had been sleeping in her blood long before the Shadow ever noticed her. Her mother's mother had been wild-touched. They'd called her mad, dangerous, exiled her to die alone in the forest. But before she died, she'd passed the gift down. Through generations, diluted but never lost. Waiting for someone to wake it up. Not the Shadow's power, the Wild's power, pure and primal and free. Lena's eyes snapped open. They were glowing green-white, the color of new leaves in spring sunlight. "You're wrong," she said. Her voice echoed strangely, layered with sounds that weren't quite human. The rustle of leaves, the howl of wind, the rush of rivers. "You didn't give me power. You tried to corrupt power that was already mine, power that's been sleeping in my bloodline for generations, and I'm done letting you use it." The Shadow Daemon's smile faltered. That's not possible. The bloodlines were wiped out. We made sure." "You missed one." Lena stood. The wild wolves rose with her, moving as one. The silver wolf was limping, bleeding, but alive and furious. "And now that one is going to burn you out of my friend's brother." She raised her hands. The power that poured from her was different this time. Not the shadow power with its hunger and malice and endless appetite. This was pure wild energy, green and gold and silver, smelling of rain and earth and new growth and ancient trees. It hit the Shadow Daemon like a tidal wave. The thing screamed. Daemon's body convulsed, the shadow trying to hold on, to maintain control, to dig its claws deeper into his flesh and mind and soul. But Lena didn't let up. She poured everything into the attack. Not just her own strength, but the strength of every wild wolf, every guard in the room, every living thing in the territory that still remembered what the forest had been before the shadow came. The bond amplified it. The wild wolves added their voices, their will. Even the alpha, dazed and bleeding, pushed himself up and howled. The pack answered. From every corner of the manor, wolves emerged, guards who'd been on patrol, servants who rarely shifted, hunters recovering from injuries. They poured into the corridor outside the armory, drawn by the alpha's call, and they all howled together. The sound was deafening, primal. It shook the walls and rattled the windows and made the Shadow Daemon's form waver, become less solid. "No!" Its voice was fading, becoming less and less like Daemon, more like the formless shriek it had been in the forest. "No, you can't! This isn't how it's supposed to! We had a deal!" "Deals can be broken," Lena said. She took a step forward, her hands blazing with green-white light. "Especially when they're made with things that don't understand what a deal actually means. Get out of him. Get out and never come back." She reached out and pressed her glowing palm to Daemon's chest. The shadow thing exploded outward from his body in a spray of black mist. It writhed in the air, trying to coalesce, to reform, to find another host. But the wild wolves were ready. They leaped into the mist, their jaws snapping. Where they bit, the shadow dissolved like smoke in sunlight. Piece by piece, they tore it apart, destroying it more thoroughly than they could have in the forest, because now they weren't fighting it on its terms. They were fighting it on Lena's terms, on the wild's terms. The shadow's screams faded. The black mist thinned, dissipated, became nothing, until there was nothing left but clean air and the smell of ozone. Daemon collapsed. The courtyard— No, they were in the armory, Lena reminded herself, though it felt like the whole world had been watching, fell silent. Lena stood there, breathing hard, her hands still glowing faintly. Around her, the wild wolves panted and bled, but they were alive, victorious. The alpha shifted back to human form, naked and covered in bruises but grinning fiercely. "Someone get me some clothes, and check on my son." Ronan was already kneeling beside Daemon, fingers pressed to his throat. "He's alive. Pulse is weak but steady. Get him to the healer, and post guards. If that thing tries to come back—" "It won't," Lena said. Her voice was hoarse, raw. "We didn't just banish it this time. We destroyed it, completely." The alpha looked at her with something like awe. "How can you be sure?" "Because I can't feel it anymore. The corruption, the wrongness. It's gone." She swayed on her feet. Mira appeared at her elbow, supporting her before she could fall. "It's really gone." Guards moved in to carry Daemon's unconscious form to the healer's chambers. Others began clearing the room, sweeping up broken glass, righting overturned furniture. Kyle limped over, one hand pressed to his ribs. His face was a mess of blood and bruises, but he was smiling. "You did it. Again. We did it. All of us." Lena gestured weakly at the wolves, the guards, the alpha. "Together. Always we with you." Kale touched her face gently, his fingers coming away bloody. She wasn't sure if it was her blood or his. Most people would take the credit. "I'm not most people." "No, you're really not." Mira made an exasperated sound. "Both of you. Healer's chambers now, before you bleed out standing up like a pair of stubborn fools. I should check on the patrols, Kyle said. The patrols can wait. Your internal bleeding can't. The Alpha, now dressed in hastily procured pants, clapped Kyle on the shoulder. Listen to the healer, son. The pack's secure. We won. He looked at Lena. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of us, Lena said again, but she was too tired to argue properly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her hollowed out and shaking. Mira practically dragged her to the healer's chambers, with Kyle limping along behind. The wild wolves followed, refusing to leave Lena's side. The next few hours passed in a blur of bandages and stitches and bitter-tasting medicine that Mira insisted would help with the pain. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of voices around her. 3 broken ribs on the left side. Lost a lot of blood, need to keep her still. The wolves won't leave, tried to make them go, but just let them stay. What harm can it do? When she woke fully, it was dark outside. A single candle burned on the table beside her bed, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Kyle sat in a chair next to her, his head tilted back against the wall, asleep. His face was clean now, the blood washed away, revealing fresh bruises and a bandage over one eye. The silver wolf lay at the foot of her bed, its eyes half closed but alert. The other wild wolves had arranged themselves around the room, a protective circle. Lena tried to sit up. Her ribs screamed in protest. Kyle's eyes opened immediately. Don't. Mira will kill both of us if you tear those stitches. How long was I out? 6 hours, give or take. He leaned forward, careful of his own injuries. How do you feel? Like I fought a shadow demon and won. You did win. He smiled, but it faded quickly. Damon's awake. Mira says he'll recover. Physically, anyway. And mentally? That's complicated. Kale's jaw tightened. He remembers everything, what he did, what the shadow made him do, the deal he made. He stopped, searching for words. Broken. That's the only way to describe it. Like the shadow burned out everything that made him who he was and left behind just wreckage. Lena's chest ached, and not just from the broken ribs. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choice. He summoned that thing, invited it in. Kale's voice was hard, but underneath she heard the pain. But he's still my brother, and now I have to figure out what to do with him. What does the Alpha say? Exile. Strip him of his name and send him beyond the borders. It's more mercy than he deserves, but... Kale's voice cracked. He's my brother. Lena reached out and took his hand. I know. They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands in the candlelight. Finally, Kyle spoke again. The pack wants to honor you, formally. The council's already drafting the ceremony. You'd be recognized as, well, they're still arguing about the exact title, but something between a council member and... No. Kale blinked. No? I can't accept. Not yet. Lena pulled her hand back, already missing the warmth. There's something I need to do first. What? Learn. Understand. The wild power. It's real. It's mine. But I don't know how to control it. Not really. Today I got lucky. Next time, I might not. She looked at the wild wolves. The silver wolf's ears perked up like it knew what she was about to say. I need to go into the forest. Live with them. Let them teach me what I am. For how long? I don't know. Weeks, months, however long it takes. Kale's expression went carefully blank. And us? What us? The bond's broken. You rejected me, remember? I remember, he said quietly. I also remember you saving my life, multiple times. I remember you fighting beside me. I remember... He stopped. I want to try again. Do this right. Not because of some mystical bond, but because I choose you, and I hope, maybe, you might choose me back. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know who I'm going to be when I come back from the forest. I might be different, changed. Then I'll get to know the new you. Kale leaned closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And maybe, if I'm lucky, fall for her even harder than I fell for the old you. You're an idiot. Probably, but I'm an idiot who's willing to wait, however long it takes. He smiled. So take your time. Learn what you need to learn. Become whoever you're meant to be. And when you come back, if you want to try this with me, I'll be here." Lena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Ask me when I get back. See if I feel the same way." Deal. The next morning, the Alpha assembled the pack in the courtyard. Word had spread fast about Damon's possession, about the battle in the armory, about Lena destroying the shadow thing completely. The crowd was huge, bigger than the one that had watched Kael reject her. Servants and guards and hunters and families, all pressed together, all watching her with expressions that ranged from awe to fear to cautious respect. The Alpha stood on the steps leading to the main hall, his presence commanding despite the bandages visible under his shirt. "3 times now," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Lena Voss has saved this pack. She exposed a traitor, she destroyed the creature hunting our wolves, and yesterday she drove out a shadow demon and saved my son's life, both my sons' lives." Murmurs ran through the crowd, not all approving, but not hostile either, just uncertain. "So I'm making it official," the Alpha continued. "Lena Voss is under my protection. She has earned a seat at my table and a voice in this pack's future. Her word carries weight, and anyone who challenges her," his eyes swept the crowd, hard and uncompromising, "challenges me." The silence that followed was heavy. Then, slowly, pack members began to lower their heads. Not in submission, in acknowledgement, in respect. Even Petra, the servant who'd mocked Lena in the kitchens, who'd called her delusional and desperate, ducked her chin. Her expression was complicated, conflicted, but she did it. Sarah, the hunter who'd questioned Lena's worth, stepped forward from the crowd. "I misjudged you," she said bluntly. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Others echoed her, not everyone. Some still looked skeptical, wary, but enough that Lena felt something shift. The Alpha looked at her expectantly. Lena took a breath and stepped forward. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was rough, but it carried. "All of you, for accepting me, for fighting with me. But I can't take that seat at your table. Not yet." The Alpha's eyebrows rose. "Why not?" "Because I need to understand what I am, what this power really means, the wild wolves." She gestured to where they waited near the gates. "They're offering to teach me, to show me the old ways, and I need to learn before I can serve this pack the way it deserves." "You're going into the forest?" "Yes, for a while." "How long?" "I don't know, but I'll come back, I promise. And when I do, if you'll still have me, I'll take that seat. I'll serve this pack however I can." The Alpha studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "The pack will be here when you return, and that seat will be waiting." "Thank you." He stepped down and clasped her shoulder. "Be careful out there, and come back stronger." "I will." The crowd began to disperse, talking in low voices. Some excited, some uncertain, all processing this strange new reality where a former servant commanded wild wolves and refused positions of honor. Ronan appeared at her elbow, pressing a wrapped bundle into her hands. Extra rations, better weapons. "And this?" He pulled out a small leather-bound journal. "For notes, observations. Whatever you learn out there, write it down. Might be useful." Lena accepted it all, her throat tight. "Thank you, Ronan, for everything." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Just come back in one piece. We'll need you when the other packs start sniffing around." "Other packs? You think word won't spread? A wild touched who can kill shadow demons and command the forest itself?" He snorted. "Every Alpha from here to the coast is going to want to test you. See if you're a threat or an opportunity. Let them come. That's the spirit." He clapped her on the shoulder and walked away. Kael was waiting near the gates. When everyone else had said their goodbyes and drifted back to their duties, he pulled her aside. "I know I said I'd wait," he said, "but I just want to say..." He hesitated. "Be safe, please." "I will. And if you need anything, if something goes wrong, I know where you are." He smiled. Then, very carefully, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. "See you when you get back," Wild touched. "See you, heir." Lena shouldered her pack and walked toward the gates. The wild wolves fell into formation around her, the silver wolf taking point. She took one last look at the manor, at the walls that had been both prison and refuge, At the pack that had rejected her and then reluctantly accepted her, at Kael standing alone near the gates watching her leave. Then she turned and walked toward the forest. The trees swallowed her quickly. Within minutes, the manor was gone, hidden behind layers of green and shadow. But Lena didn't feel afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt free, felt like herself, felt like she was walking towards something instead of running away. The wild wolves ranged around her, at ease in their element. The silver wolf kept pace at her side, a steady, reassuring presence. And deep in the forest, Lena could feel it, the true wild, ancient and vast and patient. Not the corrupted shadow version that had tried to claim her, the real thing, calling her home. She walked for hours, following paths only the wild wolves could see. The forest changed around her, growing older, wilder. The trees became massive, their trunks wider than houses, their canopies so thick almost no light reached the forest floor. This was the heart of the wild, the place few pack wolves ever saw, and fewer survived. But Lena wasn't afraid. The wild wolves led her to a clearing, a real clearing this time, not a wound, a place where sunlight broke through the canopy and wildflowers grew in riot colors. In the center was a pool of crystal-clear water. The silver wolf approached it and drank. Then it looked at Lena and jerked its head toward the water. Lena knelt and cupped her hands, drinking deeply. The water was cold and sweet and tasted like nothing she'd ever had before, like liquid moonlight. When she looked up, the forest around the clearing was full of wolves, not just the ones who'd followed her from the manor. Dozens more, maybe hundreds, wild wolves of every size and color, watching her with ancient, knowing eyes. The silver wolf shifted. It wasn't a normal shift, not the violent, painful transformation pack wolves went through. This was smooth, seamless. One moment, a wolf. The next, a woman with silver hair and eyes like frost. "Welcome home, daughter of the old blood," she said. Her voice was like wind through leaves. "We've been waiting for you." Lena stared. "Who are you?" "I am Ash, first of the wild, keeper of the ancient ways." She smiled. "And I am your teacher, if you'll have me." Yes, I'll have you." "Good." Ash gestured to the pool. "Then wash yourself, drink again, and we'll begin." And there, in the heart of the wild forest, surrounded by wolves who'd waited generations for someone like her, Lena began to learn what it truly meant to be wild-touched. Behind her, far away at the manor, life went on. Kael took up his duties as heir, stronger and more confident than before. The Alpha began rebuilding the pack's defenses and sending messages to neighboring territories. And in a cell deep below, Damon sat in silence, wrestling with the memories of what he'd done, what he'd become. Word spread, as Ronan had predicted. Stories of the wild-touched who'd killed shadow demons and commanded the forest itself. Stories that reached other packs, other territories, other alphas. Some heard those stories and felt fear. Others heard opportunity. And a few, the ambitious ones, the dangerous ones, heard a challenge. The North had a new power rising, and soon they would come to test it. But for now, in the heart of the wild forest, Lena was finally learning who she was meant to be. And that was enough. 2 months in the forest changed Lena in ways she couldn't have predicted. Her hands grew calloused from climbing trees and digging roots. Her hair grew longer, wilder, refusing to stay tied back. Her muscles hardened from running with the pack, from hunting, from learning to move through the forest like she'd been born to it. But the real changes were deeper. Ash taught her to listen, not just with her ears, but with the power itself. To feel the pulse of the forest, the rhythm of life and death and rebirth that flowed through everything. "The wild isn't chaos," Ash said one morning as they sat by the pool. "That's what pack wolves think, what their alphas teach them. But they're wrong. The wild is order of a different kind, older, truer." Lena closed her eyes and reached out the way Ash had shown her. She felt it, the network of life surrounding them. Trees communicating through their roots, animals moving in patterns that made sense once you learned to see them. Even the soil itself was alive, teeming with processes too small to see, but too important to ignore. "I feel it," she whispered. "Good. Now deeper. Past the surface. Find the old blood in your veins. The part that remembers what we were before the packs, before the territories, before wolves decided to build walls and call it civilization. Lena went deeper. And there, buried beneath years of servitude and shame, and trying to be small enough not to be noticed, she found it. A wellspring of power that had nothing to do with the shadow thing. This was hers. Had always been hers. Passed down through her mother's line, diluted by generations of hiding, but never truly lost. She opened her eyes. They were glowing green-white, and this time it didn't hurt. Didn't feel like something foreign taking control. It felt like coming home. "There she is," Ash said softly. "The daughter we've been waiting for." Over the weeks, Lena learned to shift, not into a normal wolf, but into something between. Larger than pack wolves, with fur that shimmered between brown and silver depending on the light. Her eyes stayed that eerie green-white, even in wolf form. She learned to speak with the forest itself, to ask the trees for passage, to convince rivers to part, to call animals without words. And she learned to fight, not the structured, formal combat the pack guards practiced. This was something primal, vicious, using claws and teeth and the environment itself as weapons. "The pack wolves fight to wound," Ash explained as they sparred in a clearing, both in wolf form. "To establish dominance. We fight to survive, to kill when necessary and avoid when possible. There's a difference." Lena learned that difference, learned when to fight and when to run. Learned that strength wasn't about winning every battle, but knowing which battles mattered. The wild wolves accepted her completely now. Not as their leader, they had no leaders in the pack sense, but as one of them, as family. And slowly, carefully, Lena began to understand what she'd become. Not just wild touched, not just a bridge between pack and wild. She was something new, something the world hadn't seen in generations. She was the daughter of both worlds, belonging fully to neither, but able to walk between them. And she was about to find out if that was enough. The messenger reached the forest on a cold morning when frost covered the ground and Lena's breath came out in white clouds. She was practicing with Ash, learning to channel the wild power through her weapons instead of just her hands, when the silver wolf's head snapped up. "Someone's coming," Ash said, shifting back to human form. "From the manor." Lena shifted too, pulling on the leather clothes she'd left by a tree. They were different from what she'd worn before. Lighter, more flexible, decorated with symbols Ash had taught her to weave. Symbols of protection and strength and belonging. A young guard emerged from the tree line, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. He stopped when he saw Lena, his eyes going wide. She knew why. She'd caught her reflection in the pool just yesterday. She looked different, wilder. Her eyes seemed to hold more light than they should, and there was something about the way she moved now, fluid and predatory and utterly comfortable in her own skin. "Lady Lena," the guard stammered, "the Alpha sent me. You need to come back. Now." Lena's stomach dropped. "What happened? Is KL?" "He's alive, but the manor's under siege. 3 packs from the Eastern Territories arrived 5 days ago. They're demanding to see you, to test you. And if you don't come," the guard swallowed hard. "They're threatening war." Ash growled low in her throat. This was always going to happen. The packs fear change, fear anything they can't control. "How many?" Lena asked. "Nearly 200 wolves, maybe more. They've got the manor surrounded. The Alpha's holding them off, but..." The guard looked like he might be sick. "They killed 2 of our scouts, sent their heads back as a message. They're not here to talk." Lena looked at Ash. The older woman's expression was grim. "This is your choice," Ash said. "You could stay here. Stay safe. Let the packs sort it out themselves. People will die. People always die. That's not your responsibility." "Kael's there. The Alpha. Ronan. Everyone who took a chance on a servant girl who broke some chains." Lena's hands clenched into fists. "I can't just hide while they fight my battles." Ash studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, fierce and proud. "No, I didn't think you could." She raised her voice, calling to the wild wolves scattered through the forest. "We go to war, my kin. The daughter returns to her other pack, and we will remind the territories why they learned to fear the wild." The forest erupted with howls. Within an hour, they were moving. Lena rode on the silver wolf's back, Ash in her wolf form, massive and powerful. Behind them came the wild wolves, dozens upon dozens, moving through the trees like shadows. The young guard rode his own horse, struggling to keep up, his face pale with awe and terror. They reached the manor by nightfall. Lena saw the siege immediately. 3 camps surrounding the manor, each flying different colors, cookfires blazing, wolves patrolling in formation. This wasn't a raid. This was a coordinated assault. The Alpha's wolves were on the walls, armed and armored. But even from here, Lena could see they were outnumbered, badly. The wild wolves melted into the forest at the perimeter, invisible to the besiegers. Waiting. Lena approached the main gate on foot, alone, her hands empty of weapons. A patrol spotted her immediately. 5 wolves in human form, armed with spears and swords. "Stop right there," the leader barked. "State your business." "I'm Lena Voss," she said calmly. "I believe you're looking for me." The guards exchanged glances. Then the leader gestured, and 2 of them ran toward the largest camp, shouting. Within minutes, the camps were stirring. Wolves emerging from tents, officers barking orders. And then 3 Alphas approached. Lena recognized the type immediately. They moved like Kael's father, that same absolute confidence, that weight of dominance. But where the Northern Alpha had earned his position through years of leadership, these 3 wore their power like weapons, like threats. The first was a woman, tall and scarred, with eyes like chips of ice. The second was a massive man with gray hair and arms thick as tree trunks. The third was younger, sleek, and dangerous, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. So, the woman said, looking Lena up and down. "This is the wild touch everyone's talking about. I expected someone bigger. I expected someone smarter than to lay siege to a pack under Marcus Draven's protection," Lena replied evenly. "Yet here we are." The young Alpha laughed. "She's got spine. I like that. Quiet, Corvin." The woman stepped closer. "I am Alpha Vera of the Eastern Ridge Pack. This is Alpha Gareth of the Iron Wood. And that's Alpha Corvin of the Blood River Pack. We've traveled a long way to see if the stories about you are true." "What stories?" "That you command wild wolves, that you killed a shadow demon, that you're trying to overturn the natural order by putting a servant at the same table as Alphas. I'm not trying to overturn anything. I just want to live. And we want to make sure you're not a threat to the stability of the territories." Vera's eyes were cold. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to submit to testing. Prove you're what the stories say, and if you pass, we'll consider allowing you to exist. And if I refuse, then we burn the Draven Manor to the ground and kill everyone inside." She smiled. "Starting with Marcus's heir, I hear you have a personal interest in keeping him alive." Lena felt the power stir inside her, responding to the threat. But she kept it leashed, kept her voice calm. "What kind of testing?" "Combat. You against our champions, 3 fights, win all 3, and we acknowledge your right to exist." Vera tilted her head. "Lose even 1, and you submit to exile. Leave the territories forever, and the Draven Pack loses its protection. That's not much of a choice." "No, but it's the only one you're getting." Lena looked past them to the manor walls. She could see figures up there, guards, pack members. And there, on the highest rampart, she saw Kael. Even from this distance, she could feel his eyes on her. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow, at dawn, in the clearing east of here." Vera's smile widened. "Get some rest, little wild touched. You're going to need it." They led her through to the manor. The gates opened and closed behind her quickly, and then she was surrounded by familiar faces. The Alpha reached her first, his expression grim. "You shouldn't have come back." "Yes, I should have. This is my fault, my problem. It's our problem now." He jerked his head toward the walls. "Come on, we need to talk strategy." The council chamber was packed. Guards, hunters, advisors, everyone who had a stake in the pack's survival. They all turned when Lena entered, and she saw the same mix of emotions she'd seen 2 months ago. Fear, hope, uncertainty. Kael stood near the head of the table. When he saw her, his expression transformed, relief and something else, something warm and fierce. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened in surprise, then relaxed into it. He was thinner than she remembered, harder. The siege had taken its toll. "I'm glad you're alive," he said quietly, his mouth near her ear. "I'm glad you are too." He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. "You look different." "I am different. Better different or worse different? I guess we'll find out tomorrow." The Alpha cleared his throat. "As touching as this is, we have a situation. Lena, what did they offer you?" She told them. 3 fights. Win all 3 or face exile. The room erupted. "That's insane. They're trying to kill her legally. We can't let her fight alone." "Enough!" The Alpha's voice cut through the chaos. "Lena, what are their champions like?" "I didn't see them. But if they're alphas from 3 different territories, they'll send their best. Probably wolves who've trained their entire lives for combat. And you've had 2 months. 2 months learning from the wild wolves. That's worth more than years of formal training." Ronan spoke up from across the table. "Even if you win all 3 fights, what's to stop them from attacking anyway? They've already killed our scouts, broken the peace accords. They're looking for an excuse. Then we don't give them one." Lena met his eyes. "I win all 3 fights. Publicly. In front of their entire force. Make it so humiliating they can't justify continuing the siege. And if you lose? I won't." Kyle shook his head. "You can't know that." "I can. Because I'm not going in alone." She told them about the wild wolves, about Ash and the others waiting in the forest, about what she'd learned. The room went silent. Finally, the Alpha spoke. "The wild wolves will fight with you? They'll be there. But I won't need them to fight. Just to show these Alphas that I'm not alone. That challenging me means challenging something older and more dangerous than they understand." "That might work," Sarah said slowly. She'd been standing in the corner, silent until now. "If you can back it up." "I can." The meeting went late into the night, planning contingencies and backup plans. But Lena barely heard most of it. Her mind was already on tomorrow, on the fights, on what she'd have to do. When it finally ended and people began to drift away, Kyle caught her arm. "Walk with me?" They climbed to the highest rampart, the one that overlooked the siege camps. The fires were still burning down there, hundreds of wolves preparing for tomorrow's spectacle. "I missed you," Kyle said quietly. "I missed you too. Did you find what you were looking for? In the forest?" Lena thought about that, about Ash and the wild wolves and the old blood singing in her veins, about learning to shift into something between human and wolf, about discovering that strength wasn't about winning, but about knowing who you were and refusing to apologize for it. "Yeah," she said. "I think I did." "Good." He turned to face her fully. "Because I need to tell you something, and I need to do it before tomorrow, in case..." "Don't. In case something goes wrong," he continued stubbornly. "I need you to know. The rejection, breaking the bond. It was the worst mistake of my life. And these last 2 months, not knowing if you were okay, if you were coming back..." His voice cracked. "I love you. Not because of some mystical bond, just because of you. Who you are. What you've become. And if tomorrow goes bad, I needed you to know that." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "You're an idiot." "I know. But you're my idiot." She rose on her toes and kissed him. Softly at first, then deeper. "I love you too, and tomorrow's not going to go bad. I'm going to win. And then we're going to figure out what comes next, together. Promise?" "Promise." They stood there together in the cold, watching the siege fires burn until the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. Then it was time. The clearing was massive, easily large enough for the crowd that had gathered. The 3 packs formed a semicircle on one side. The Draven pack stood opposite, smaller but defiant. And in the center, Lena waited. She wore the leather clothes from the forest, decorated with Ash's symbols. Her hair was loose, wild, her eyes already glowing faintly green-white. The 3 alphas stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. "First champion," Vera called out. "Kellen of the Iron Wood." A massive wolf stepped forward from Gareth's pack. He was huge, even in human form, covered in scars, carrying an axe that looked like it could split trees. He shifted mid-stride, becoming a wolf the size of a bear, all muscle and teeth and killing intent. The crowd roared. Lena didn't shift. She just stood there, waiting. Kellen charged. He was fast for his size, covering the ground between them in seconds. His jaws opened wide, aiming for her throat. Lena moved, not away, toward him. She dropped under his lunge, rolled, came up behind him. Her hand touched his flank, just a brief contact, and green-white light flared. Kellen yelped and tumbled, his legs giving out. He scrambled to his feet, snarling, but something was wrong. His movements were uncoordinated, clumsy. "What did you do?" he growled. "Asked your muscles to rest for a bit." They agreed. Lena circled him slowly. "You can submit now. This doesn't have to get ugly." Kellen charged again, ignoring the way his legs were trembling. This time Lena didn't dodge. She met him head-on, shifting in mid-step into her wild form. Larger than a pack wolf, her fur shimmering, her eyes blazing. They collided with a sound like thunder. For a moment they grappled, teeth and claws and raw strength. But Lena had spent 2 months learning to fight from wolves who'd perfected it over centuries. She knew leverage, knew pressure points, knew how to use an opponent's size against them. She twisted, using Kellen's momentum to flip him. He crashed onto his back, and before he could recover, she had her jaws around his throat. Not biting, just holding, showing that she could. The crowd went silent. "Submit," Lena said, the word coming out distorted by her wolf form, but still understandable. Kellen struggled once more, then went still. "I submit." She released him and stepped back, shifting to human form. Kellen limped back to his pack, his head low. "Second champion," Vera called. "Maris of the Blood River." This fighter was different. Lean, fast, with eyes that missed nothing. She carried twin daggers and moved like water. "I've heard about you," Maris said, circling. "The servant who got lucky, who found some wild wolves and thinks that makes her special." "I never said I was special. You're the ones who laid siege to prove a point. We're here to remind you of your place." Maris struck without warning, her blades flashing. Lena dodged, but barely. These weren't wild swings. This was precision, skill, years of training. Maris pressed the attack, her daggers weaving a pattern of death. Lena gave ground, deflecting what she could, taking shallow cuts when she couldn't. The crowd was roaring again, sensing blood. Lena's power stirred, wanting to lash out, but she held it back. Waited. Maris overextended, just slightly, just for a moment. Lena moved inside her guard and caught her wrist. Green-white light flared again. Maris gasped as her own dagger turned in her hand, suddenly too heavy to hold. It clattered to the ground. "Metal remembers the earth it came from," Lena said, "and the earth listens to me." She swept Maris's legs and put her down hard. The second dagger went flying. Maris lay there, breathing hard, her eyes wide with something like fear. "Submit," Lena said. "I submit. 2 down, 1 to go." "Final champion," Vera called. Her smile was sharp, dangerous. "Me!" The crowd went wild. Vera stepped into the clearing and shifted immediately. She was smaller than Kellen, faster than Maris, and her eyes held the cunning of someone who'd survived decades as an alpha. "You've done well," Vera said, her wolf voice carrying. "Better than I expected, but I didn't come here to lose to a child playing at power." "Then you should have stayed home." Vera attacked with brutal efficiency. No showboating, no hesitation, just pure calculated violence. Lena met her in wolf form and they crashed together like storm fronts colliding. This fight was different. Vera knew how to counter the wild style, knew how to read Lena's movements. Every trick Lena tried, Vera had a response. They fought across the clearing, tearing up earth, sending pack members scrambling backward. Blood flew, Lena's and Vera's both. Lena felt herself tiring. The first 2 fights, the journey back, the months in the forest. It was all catching up with her. Vera sensed it and pressed harder. "You're good," Vera snarled between snapping jaws. "But good isn't enough. You need to be perfect, and you're not." She had Lena pinned, her jaws closing toward Lena's throat. And Lena realized Vera was right. She couldn't win this with skill, couldn't win it with wild tricks. So she stopped trying to win it alone. She reached out, not with her power, but with the bond. The connection to every wild wolf watching from the forest. To Ash, to the silver wolf, to all of them. And she called. The wild wolves erupted from the tree line. Dozens of them, hundreds, pouring into the clearing like a flood. They didn't attack, just surrounded the fight, forming a circle of glowing eyes and bared teeth. Vera froze, her dominance faltering for just a moment. That moment was enough. Lena twisted free and got her jaws around Vera's throat. Not biting, just holding, showing that she could. The clearing was utterly silent except for the sound of breathing. Lena's, Vera's, the wild wolves. "Submit," Lena growled. Vera's eyes blazed with fury, but she was pinned, surrounded, outmaneuvered. Slowly, she let her body go limp. "I submit." Lena released her and stepped back, shifting to human form. The wild wolves didn't move, just watched, waiting. Lena turned to face the three alphas. "I won all 3 fights, as agreed." Vera shifted back, her expression dark. "You cheated, called the wild wolves. You said I had to win 3 fights. You didn't say how. And last I checked, using allies isn't cheating, it's strategy." Lena's eyes swept the crowd. "I am wild touched. I command the forest itself. And if you want to test that, if you want to continue this siege, then bring it on. But know that you're not fighting a servant anymore. You're fighting something the territories haven't seen in generations. And you will lose." The clearing erupted in chaos. Some wolves shouting support for continuing the fight, others calling for retreat. The 3 alphas conferred in low voices. Finally, Gareth stepped forward. "You won. Fair or not, you won. We'll honor the agreement and withdraw." "Good choice. But this isn't over," Vera said coldly. "The territories are watching, and not all of them will be as reasonable as we were. Then they'll learn the same lesson you did, the hard way." The 3 packs began to break camp within the hour. Lena watched from the walls as they packed up and moved out, heading back east. When the last of them disappeared over the horizon, the Draven pack erupted in celebration. But Lena didn't join them. She was too tired, too wrung out. She found Kyle in the courtyard and let him wrap his arms around her. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it. We did it. All of us. Always we with you." He pulled back to look at her face. "What happens now?" Now? Lena thought about that. About the wild wolves waiting in the forest. About the seat at the alpha's table. About this man holding her like she was something precious. Now I stay. I take that seat. I help this pack navigate whatever comes next. She smiled. And I finally let myself have what I want. Which is, you, idiot. I want you. He laughed and kissed her, right there in front of everyone. And Lena kissed him back, not caring who saw, not caring what they thought. The alpha found them later in the hall, still planning, still trying to process everything that had happened. "The council's ready to make it official," he said. "Your seat, your title, your place in this pack." "What title?" Lena asked. "We're still arguing about that. Some want wild touched, others want keeper of the forest. Personally, I think we should call you what you are." He smiled. "The unseen queen. The one nobody saw coming, the one who changed everything." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I was a servant. 2 months ago I was scrubbing floors and getting slapped in courtyards. And now you're the wolf who commands the wild itself. Who defeated 3 alphas as champions. Who saved this pack more times than I can count." The alpha extended his hand. "Take the seat, Lena. You've earned it 100 times over." She took his hand. "On one condition." "Name it." "The wild wolves get territory. Land they can call their own, adjacent to ours. A place where they're protected, and we can work together instead of pretending they don't exist." The alpha considered that, then nodded. "Done. Anything else?" "Damon. What's going to happen to him?" "Still exile. What he did, even possessed, he made that choice. He invited that thing in, but..." The alpha's expression softened slightly. "He can return, eventually, when he's proven he's not a threat, if he wants to." "Thank you." That night they held a feast. The whole pack, celebrating their survival, their victory. Lena sat at the alpha's table, Kyle on one side, Ronan on the other. It felt surreal, impossible. Like a dream she'd wake up from any moment. But it wasn't a dream. This was real. Her life. Her choice. Later, when the celebration had died down and most of the pack had drifted off to bed, Lena found herself back on the ramparts. The wild wolves were out there in the forest, settling into their new territory. She could feel them through the bond, content and safe. Ash appeared beside her, materializing out of shadow. You did well, daughter. I had good teachers. You had the blood. We just helped you remember. Ash looked out at the forest. What will you do now? You stand between two worlds. That's not an easy place to be. No, but it's my place. And I think, Lena paused, searching for the words, I think that's the point. The world doesn't need more walls between pack and wild. It needs bridges, people who can walk in both places and bring them together. And you'll be that bridge? I'm going to try. Ash smiled. Then we'll be here, watching, helping when we can. She started to fade back into shadow. And daughter? Your mother would be proud. So would her mother, and all the mothers before that who carried the old blood. They're all proud. Then she was gone. Lena stood there alone for a while longer, looking out at the territory she'd helped protect, at the forest that had claimed her, at the manor where she'd started as nothing and ended as something new. She thought about the journey, about being rejected and broken and cast aside, about finding power in the last place anyone expected, about learning that strength wasn't about winning, but about refusing to stay down when the world tried to keep you there. She thought about the girl she'd been, scared, small, desperate for approval. And she thought about who she was now, scarred, strong, and finally free. The rejection had nearly destroyed her. But in breaking her, it had also freed her, forced her to find strength she didn't know she had, to become something the world had never seen coming. Maybe that was the lesson. Maybe the worst things that happened to you, the moments that felt like endings, were actually beginnings, opportunities to become something different, something more. Or maybe there was no lesson. Maybe it was just survival, just getting through the bad days and finding people worth fighting for on the other side. Either way, she was here, alive, powerful, free. And that was enough. Footsteps behind her, Kyle carrying 2 cups of something that steamed in the cold air. Thought you might want company, he said, handing her one. Always. They stood there together, watching the stars come out, planning a future that neither of them could have imagined 2 months ago. And in the morning, when the council officially recognized her title, when they carved her name into the record as the first wild touch to sit at an alpha's table in 300 years, Lena would stand proud. Not as a servant who got lucky, as a queen who earned her crown through blood and tears and refusing to break when the world tried its hardest to destroy her. The unseen queen, the one nobody saw coming, the one who proved that the weakest link, when pushed hard enough, doesn't break. It becomes steel.